with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, November 9th, 2020. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Joe Biden assumes the mantle of president-elect. Kamala Harris becomes the first woman and woman of color to become vice president-elect. Meanwhile, coronavirus nears escape velocity. Utah imposes a universal mask mandate as infections skyrocket. However, some possible good news. Pfizer has a vaccine it claims is 90% effective. Regardless, won't be ready for this winter. And the détente ends as progressives and moderate Democrats try and establish the narrative. Meanwhile, Donald Trump still thinks he's going to be president. Who is going to tell him? UN humanitarian official condemns Israeli demolition of Palestinian homes. And COVID relief-starved cities look to shrink retiree benefits. Meanwhile, the 2020 election is a redistricting and democracy disaster. And turnout shatters some very long-held Democratic myths. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with us today. We are a little bit short-staffed, so bear with us as we muddle through this. People are very excited weekend. Matt, I'm not sure if you heard the news, but on Saturday, Joe Biden was I guess called. I mean, it's not official yet. It isn't official ever in these elections until well into December. But all of the major media outlets called the election for Joe Biden. As it is today, or I should say as of yesterday evening, Joe Biden's lead had increased to over 20,000. Had increased to over 20,000 in Arizona. Joe Biden's lead increased to over 10,000 in Georgia. Joe Biden's lead increased to almost 45,000 in Pennsylvania. And this is not, and this is very important because I spent probably more time than I should have listening to right-wing talk radio this weekend. And they are still harping about, and we should say right now, Donald Trump is somewhere in a bunker underneath the White House. And I think they're giving him a lot of comfort food. They're very, very nervous about telling him what the reality of the election is. He is yet to concede. But that number, 43,194 as of yesterday, in Joe Biden's lead in Pennsylvania, it's probably higher as of now. They've been doing it. They've been counting this morning. That number does not include ballots that arrived, that were cast before November 3rd, but arrived after 8 p.m. on November 3rd. those ballots have been sequestered. Now, I am personally of the mind that they should be counted, but these are the ones that are subjected to litigation that could go to the Supreme Court. These are the ones that the Supreme Court said, we're not going to deal with those now prior to the election, but there was a state Supreme Court, or I should say a state court, that said sequester these ballots so that we know ballots that came in after 8:30 p.m. on election day, we're going to put into a different pile. So if we need to exclude those, and really what we're saying is that even if you cast the ballot before November 3rd and put it in the mail, if the mail is slow, then it's your fault as a voter. But put that aside for a moment. This is a separate pile of ballots that have yet to be counted. And the Republicans are talking about these ballots as if they will make a difference if they're excluded. But Joe Biden is already up by almost 45,000 votes in Pennsylvania, doesn't need those ballots. Yet this is how they'll maintain their grift. This is how Donald Trump will ask his followers for more money with the hopes of paying off campaign debt, which I think probably we will find at one point has largely just gone into a whole series of basically self-dealing or extended self-dealing. But we shall see on that. But I want to make that clear because we hear a lot about these court cases, and none of them at this point appear to be able to make any difference whatsoever. And on Saturday, and I had time had collapsed. I thought we had talked about this Friday, but apparently it happened on Saturday. Here's Rudy Giuliani saying that networks don't get to call elections, as if that's never happened before. And it's true. The networks can get it wrong. They scheduled a press conference out in front of the Four Seasons. Not the Four Seasons Hotel. No, of course not. The Four Seasons Total Landscaping Company. Here it is.
The poll? The call. It was called for Joe Biden. Because they don't decide the election. The call for Joe Biden is it? Who was it called by? Oh my goodness, all the networks. Wow. All the networks. We have to forget about the law. Judges don't count. All the networks thought Biden was going to win by 10%. Gee, what happened? Come on, don't be ridiculous. Networks don't get to decide elections. Courts do.
Not voters.
Courts do, not voters. Voters don't even come into play here. Folks, can you imagine, and this is why we heard so many reports of that Donald Trump was very upset about his legal team. Can you imagine that being the lawyer that you're counting on to reverse the results of an election? There is no doubt in my mind that Rudy Giuliani, when he asked which networks, did not realize that all the networks had. Right? Right? I mean, he was hoping he could say, "Oh, you mean the Communist News Network or MSDNC?" I mean, this is, in fact, I listened to Rudy Giuliani. I think it must have been, maybe it was Friday night. He has a 1-hour show on WABC, and I got to say, he, as someone who has done talk radio, and also has times where he's very tired. And Rudy's mailing this in, folks. He did about a 4-minute monologue and then took phone calls from people without having any idea, apparently, not even listening to anything he's saying. But that's so when he says Communist News Network and MSDNC, that is, I'm not paraphrasing, I'm quoting. That is what he anticipated he was going to get. And then he found out that, oh, yes, even Fox has, called it. And the story, of course, that people took away from that was that the president thought, apparently there was some miscommunication between Corey Lewandowski and the president to the effect of, we're going to do the conference in Philadelphia at the Four Seasons. And it was not the Four Seasons Hotel. It ended up being Four Seasons Total Landscaping, which I guess on one side of it is, I'm not sure, is it a dry cleaners and then a sex toy shop? So, I mean, very convenient for folks.
I still suspect that the Four Seasons, the real Four Seasons, may have been like, we actually want to get paid for renting out our, venue. So no, we won't.
Oh no, they were very quick to say, this is not happening at our place. We're not associated with that whatsoever. Supposedly the story they're spinning now is that they could not find a less hostile part of town. That the first press conference they tried to do, which I think we played clips of with Pam Bondi, was overshadowed by a DJ who had a loudspeaker system and they couldn't hear it. So she could only just wave a document in the air. I mean, I laugh because what is hilarious about all of this is they keep claiming there is massive evidence of fraud. We are 6 days out now, and yet they have not been able, when you hear them talk about the fraud, they will just talk about it in the most general terms. And they have not been able to establish a single, they say that, well, there's a whistleblower, they're in Michigan or in Pennsylvania, but nothing in terms of what the whistleblower has said. There was an attempt to say that there were no observers who were let into these various counting places. And sadly for them, there were observers there. And it was a total fabrication. And in multiple jurisdictions, the judges basically said, you're wasting our time. Here is Rudy Giuliani on with Maria Bartiromo. This is on Sunday Morning Futures. This is a Fox Business News show. And
nope, it's Fox News.
Fox News. Oh, sorry. And they keep, asking for evidence. They don't get any evidence. And so now they're wondering, like, will the baby in chief concede? And apparently all the reporting now is that many of these legal cases are there just to sort of give Donald Trump a sort of like a soft landing, so that it's not too shocking to him. But here is Maria Bartiromo almost pleading with Rudy Giuliani to, like, we're watching, this is getting a little bit ugly now.
So, in other words, you're saying that will the president concede anytime soon, I guess, is my final question, given all of this?
It really would be wrong for him. At this point, it would be wrong for him to concede. There is strong evidence that this was an election that in at least 3 or 4 states and possibly 10, it was stolen. In other words, it was based on false votes. Now, you can't let an election go into history without challenging that. I mean, Gore got 2 months to challenge it. I would think they'd give him at least 2 months, right?
Yeah, people are just like, please give us a timeline here. Can you imagine the incompetence associated with a Democratic Party that is perpetrating fraud in 10 states, yet that can't flip the Senate? Like, as if these people are like, look, we're doing this. We're all going to vote for Biden for president. This is the way we're going to do it. We've got a lot of dead people lined up. Shouldn't we have also had them vote down ballot?
Yeah, can we leave off Georgia? We're kind of running up the score at that point. Can we go up to Maine and try to knock Susan Collins off maybe?
Right. Or why did we elect Joe Biden in Georgia fraudulently and then force a runoff with our Senate candidates? Does that make any sense to anybody? And it's just coincidental, all of this fraud. I mean, this is what we have to believe if we're to believe their narrative, which is that there was a massive concerted effort by the Democrats to commit fraud across 10 states, yet it didn't occur to them to also help out their Senate candidates in these states. right? I mean, that's what we're to believe. And like, oh, I mean, if we could have done this in Georgia, we couldn't have done this in Maine. What about turning some state houses? Later in the program, we're going to talk a little bit about the failures that took place down ballot. I know people want to celebrate, but this is a get back to work moment, folks. Take your vacation at the end of the year. People had a lot of excitement over the weekend, and rightfully so. But Joe Biden's working today, so we should too. Just want to remind you that today's program is sponsored, at least in part, by Honey. Look, a lot of people doing a lot of online shopping these days. I certainly am. I'm not going into a stores if I can help it in certain instances. You buy stuff online. I know certainly my daughter loves to do that. Well, Honey has been a bit of a lifesaver. It's the free browser extension that scours the internet for promo codes and automatically applies the best one available at checkout. If you've heard me talk about Honey in the past, you know that years ago, I sat Mila down. It was almost like I was telling her, like, you know, the birds and the bees type of thing, which I actually did at a very young age, but that's not the point. The point is that I said to her, I said, look, before you buy any of this stuff, because she used to buy, there's a kids clothing store. I don't know. But I used to say, you know, you've got to search for coupons. You can save $5 or $10 sometimes. You can get free shipping. Huge pain in the butt because you got to go to these like coupon places and see if you can get the right one. Half the time it doesn't work. Well, that's where Honey comes in. It is basically your online shopping best friend. Here's how it works. You get Honey on your computer for free, and you do this with just 2 easy clicks. You go to joinhoney.com/majority. When you get there, 2 clicks is all it's going to take. And then when you're checking out one of its over 30,000 supported sites, Honey pops up, and all you have to do is click and apply coupons. Boom. Honey searches for the coupons. They find working codes. They apply the best one, and they put it in your cart, and all of a sudden you've saved, I don't know, $5, $10, 10%, 12%, free shipping, whatever it is. They support all kinds of retailers, tech and gaming sites, fashion brands, even food delivery. I can tell you right now, there is a piece of clothing that I'm wearing right now. In fact, you're looking at it, that I've saved a couple of bucks on with Honey. And my daughter, I see, it adds up. It adds up over time. Makes a difference in what she purchases all the time, buying a lot of clothes. And then, of course, my daughter turns around and sells it online and then thinks she's a business person. But look, it's simple. If you have a computer, Honey should be on it. It's free. It works with whatever browser you use. You can get Honey for free today at joinhoney.com/majority. That's joinhoney.com/majority. Check it out. Also, this company has been a big help for me. I mean, in addition to the great food, but it's been a help in a couple of different ways. Particularly right now, I am in no mood to cook. In the past couple of weeks have been rather difficult. I am now I've got into this thing. Well, I should tell you, I'm speaking in terms of Freshly. Freshly is a service where they basically send you fully prepared dinners delivered fresh, not frozen, right to your door. So you can avoid the grocery store if you want to. You can avoid cooking if you want to. They have golden oven fried chicken, creamy springtime risotto, fall apart tender beef brisket. And that's just a few of the 30 plus health conscious options to choose from. For me, lately, I've been eating basically anything that I can eat in a bowl. That's the way I've been eating now. They have this sausage, a baked penne, which is amazing. And I can put it in a bowl. I ate it. White bean turkey chili, one of my favorites. And they have a fried chicken hash with roasted sweet corn. I put it in a bowl. That's basically the way I'm working this. But it has also been amazing for my mom, who has been dealing with some health issues. So me and my sisters, we signed her up for this. She gets it delivered. We had signed her up for this before they started to advertise here. And because we knew that my mom would be like, well, I can't let you pay for this. We had told her, I hope she's not listening today, that they were advertising on the show and that I was getting it for free. And then just coincidentally, Freshly came and decided to advertise on the show. I was like, great. Now I'm, but my mom loves the food. I do too. So you can join both of us and 1.5 million satisfied customers. Skip the shopping, the prepping, the cooking, and the cleanup. Freshly is offering our listeners $40 off their first 2 orders at freshly.com/majority. That's freshly.com/majority. We'll put both those links into the podcast and the podcast descriptions and the YouTube descriptions. So before we get to more news related to the election, Joe Biden today is assembling a coronavirus task force. And it will consist of actual scientists, scientists who are respected by their peers, who are working and take coronavirus seriously. The one thing that could very well bog down the attempts of the Biden administration, or I should say transition team, to get ramped up, because there's nothing that these folks can propose that Biden can obviously do now. But he is getting these proposals lined up so that on day one, he can implement these to the extent that he can implement them with a potentially hostile Senate. But there's another problem. There's a Trump administration appointee, this is according to the Washington Post, who is refusing to sign a letter which allows President-elect Joe Biden's transition team to formally begin its work this week. It's the administrator of the General Services Administration. This is an agency that's in charge of federal buildings, and they must sign paperwork which essentially allows the flowing of millions of dollars, which are budgeted to transition administrations, if you will, gives them access to government buildings, gives them access to government officials, gives them, I imagine like key cards or IDs, equipment. Essentially, there is a budget. There is facilities all set aside for presidential transitions. One person has to authorize it, and this person, Emily Murphy, who is the GSA administrator, refuses to write the letter. Now, there was a transition delay in 2000 because there was no call and no clear consensus on who the president was until December. But aside from that, that's it. GSA spokeswoman Pamela Pennington says an ascertainment has yet been made, and its administrator will continue to abide by and fulfill all requirements under the law. I mean, it is unclear when this is going to happen, but this is part of the continuance of the Trump administration to basically say, we will screw over. I mean, look, even if you believe that, even if you are of the belief that we don't know what the outcome of the presidency is, and I don't think there's any rational people who are not on the payroll, literally, of the Trump campaign who argue this. You could release these funds and have this work done just to ramp up. But hopefully it will not inhibit the Biden administration too much, because obviously we have in this country, and it's happening to a certain extent around the world, but we are perhaps uniquely ill-suited for what's happening. According to Scott Gottlieb, who was the former Food and Drug Administrator from 2017 to April 2019, we're going to have this is a quote, we're going to have a record number of hospitalizations this week. Now, 56,000 people are hospitalized, 11,000 are on ICU. These are very big numbers nationally, and it's accelerating very quickly. Utah, I mentioned, has called for a universal mask mandate because they are running out of ICU beds. There is, we are experiencing a massive surge in coronavirus epidemics. We have 10 million people infected or have been infected in this country. 1 million of those have happened in the last couple of weeks. So you do the math. The rate in which infections are accelerating, the number of infections are accelerating, is, I think it's terrifying for epidemiologists. And we are headed into, and not only that, I mean, frankly, I understand the intense desire to celebrate Donald Trump's loss, but I got to be honest with you. I saw images of all the celebrations, and I got very, very concerned. I think in general, we saw during the protests, at least in the context of New York, there was very little implications in terms of COVID infections to the protests. But I think people, in many respects, during those protests were more orderly and were more conscientious about mask wearing. And I worry about all of those celebrations. And then I also worry about a lot of those folks in 2 weeks going to see their relatives for Thanksgiving. And of course, just broadly speaking, across the country, Thanksgiving is going to could potentially be another inflection point. So a lot of concerns in terms of coronavirus. It makes total sense that the first thing that Joe Biden would do on the first day, working day, that he is the president-elect, would be to convene a panel. However, there is some good news. And it is always best to take these things with a certain grain of salt. However, Pfizer and its partner BioNTech announced today that the vaccine they have been developing against COVID-19 was not only strongly effective, but it exceeds expectations by a magnitude of, like as far as I could tell, most expectations and hopes were for a vaccine that was at least 50% effective. 60 to 70% effective would have been considered very, very good. According to Pfizer and BioNTech, their vaccine, this is from Stat News. The company said early analysis of the results showed that individuals who received 2 injections of the vaccine 3 weeks apart experienced more than 90% fewer cases of symptomatic COVID-19 than those who received a placebo. Now, phase 3 of the study is ongoing. Additional data could affect results, but there's a couple of things to be clear about. 90% fewer cases of symptomatic COVID-19. That's good. The companies will not file for an emergency use authorization to distribute the vaccine until they reach one more milestone. That is when half of the patients in their study have been observed for safety issues for at least 2 months following their second dose. And according to Pfizer, they will cross that threshold in the 3rd week of November. So we're 2 weeks out before they will file for an emergency use authorization, but they must have some measure of confidence at this point. Couple other things to note. There's no information yet on whether the vaccine prevents severe cases. What happens to those 10% who do contract it? There is no information whether it prevents people from carrying COVID-19 without symptoms. It is also not possible at this point to say with any confidence how long it will protect against infection with the virus. But, it's not impossible to imagine that you get your 2 shots in the first 3 weeks. 6 months later, you got to get a booster shot. I mean, for 90% of efficacy, if this holds, this is basically if that holds, it is basically a ticket to ending the pandemic. Side effects appear to be fever, some aches. Seems to be worse than a flu shot, but not dramatically so. Also, the results have not been peer-reviewed. They have not been peer-reviewed by outside scientists. They have not been published in a medical journal. There is no information as to how independent monitors have what they have observed in terms of the vaccinations. Pfizer claims that up to 50 million doses could be available globally by the end of the year, with 1.3 billion available in 2021. Apparently, one of the big distribution challenges to this is that the vaccine must be stored at super cold temperatures. Super cold temperatures. So this is a challenge. This is going to be a challenge to make sure that it can be distributed. But all of these things are things that can be managed far better than actually finding something that is 90% effective. So there it is. This is not something that's going to be available this winter. It will probably not be something that becomes widely available if all of these things go right from here on in their testing until the summer of 2021. That is what the experts say. So the big challenge for this country and the world is going to be to get through the next couple of months, frankly. And we shall see. It's going to require some, we may see more mandatory mask mandates. I don't think that Biden at this point, from what I've read, is not planning to do something like that, but I think they're going to widely encourage it. So we will see. Let's move on to some of the not terribly exciting aspects of this election. There is, as you know, January 5th, there's going to be a runoff in Georgia. 2 Senate races. David Perdue versus John Ossoff. Raphael Warnock versus Kelly Loeffler. These races, traditionally, Democrats have not won in runoff races in Georgia. Traditionally, they have, and this is from Dave Weigel's the trailer, just giving a couple of examples historically. Democrat John Barrow faced a runoff with Republican Brad Raffensperger in the race of Secretary of State. This was 2 years ago. Barrow trailed in the first round by 16,000 votes and lost by more than 65,000 votes. Turnout overall had fallen by half. 12 years ago, when turnout surged in the race between McCain and Obama, then Saxby Chambliss went to overtime with Democrat Jim Martin. Chambliss led the first round by 3 points and the second by 15. So the trend is in Georgia if past is indicative of a future, that the Democrats are not going to win. However, we just saw a Democratic president win Georgia for the first time in almost my entire lifetime. And I'm fairly old. Certainly within, it's been decades upon decades. So it is unclear as to what the outcome is. It couldn't have more relevance, despite the fact that Ossoff and Warnock are not necessarily the most progressive of Senate candidates. Putting aside that apparently Zephyr Teachout has said that Ossoff has some pretty good antitrust bona fides. Warnock has, I think, is closer in terms of like some policies that we would appreciate as progressives. I guess Clinton won Georgia in 92, so that's 30 years almost. On day one, if the Democrats control the Senate, even by one vote, and the tie vote would be Kamala Harris's, you have the opportunity through the CRA, which is an administrative law that says Congress can reverse any executive orders that have come down by the president within a 60-day working day threshold. So that goes back to almost basically through 7 months ago. Congress can reverse it. They do not need a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate to do so. So the House, a Senate where Kamala Harris is the tiebreaker, and Joe Biden can reverse a whole slew of executive orders that I anticipate we're going to get from Donald Trump over the next couple of months. Certainly ones that he's had in the past. And once these executive orders are reversed, to reinstitute those as laws, the next Congress has to pass them with a 2/3 majority. Many of Barack Obama's executive orders, particularly dealing with the environment, were overturned by Republicans in this manner and made well out of reach for future Congresses to fix, even legislatively, even statutorily. The implications for Joe Biden to seat cabinet members and to pass legislation all ride on these two races in Georgia. This is an all hands on deck. The reality is the odds are stacked against the Democrats there. But again, that assessment of reality is based on past performance. And we have seen in Georgia specifically an ability to outperform past performance. Nearly 30 years it's been since a Democrat won Georgia as a president. And we saw it happen a couple of days ago. So if you have the opportunity to engage in that, I can certainly understand the cynicism and the pessimism, but there's no value in that whatsoever. So better to engage with that situation than not. Tomorrow on the program, we'll have David Dayen, executive editor of The American Prospect, on the show, and he's going to come and he's going to talk about what Joe Biden can do even if he doesn't have a Senate. And there's a lot. And just like the conversation we had with Jeff Hauser last week, very important for people who care about where we're going. I mean, Donald Trump has been defeated, but the political ideology that ushered him into office, Republicanism, has not. And we still have, and I say this as a progressive, if you will, or to the left side of the Democratic Party, a huge unfulfilled agenda. And we're already seeing now the jockeying for power in this new Congress. If you will recall, we've talked about this a bunch of times. After 2018, Democrats had an incredible showing, the most successful off-year election in decades. If they didn't have the numbers that challenged their biggest win ever, it was only because of gerrymandering. Sheer votes, they had the biggest win they had had in off-year elections. Within days, we saw the moderates and conservatives in the Democratic Party attempt to build their power within and the narrative within their within the media, within their caucus, by attacking Ilhan Omar. In fact, they so ham-fistedly did this that, and Nancy Pelosi engaged in this as well, it completely overshadowed their passing H.R. 1, which was their big ethics, anti-corruption, pro-voting. It was actually a very good bill. Nobody ever heard a thing about it because Pelosi, for whatever reason, decided to make this about attacking Ilhan Omar and undercutting the squad. And they right out of the gate, they tried to do this again, where you saw moderates come out early on and claim that the reason why the Democrats did so dismally down ballot, and they did do dismally down ballot, lost a couple of seats in the House, failed to pick up the Senate, still a chance to do so, but it shouldn't come down in this situation to two runoffs in Georgia. And maybe even more importantly, in state House races across the country, Democrats failed in every single state to change the course of redistricting that's going to take place. If anything, it went backwards. Arizona. Connecticut, they failed to get a supermajority to gain control of the redistricting. Arizona, there's an independent redistricting commission that's been in place since 2000, but the Supreme Court is primed to strike down independent commissions on redistricting. They say that the state legislature can't even decide to delegate that authority. In Georgia, Republicans maintain full control over redistricting. In Iowa, there's a nonpartisan agency has proposed maps to the Iowa legislature. But the Democrats failed to flip the state house to break GOP's full control. And this is the first time where Republicans will have full control at Iowa. So they may reject that nonpartisan redistricting map. In Kansas, Republicans maintain their supermajority, even though Democrats just needed one single state house seat to flip, to break the veto-proof majority. There's a Democratic governor there, but they have veto override power now. In Michigan, they have an independent redistricting commission, could get invalidated by the Supreme Court. They failed to retake Democrats there. We failed to take the state house. Even though it's possible we could get another situation in Michigan like we have in Wisconsin, where Democrats win more votes, but get less seats because of it. Remember, this is the dynamic that we have in Wisconsin. 54% of the votes in 2018 went to Democrats, but only 36% of the seats did. That is the problem with redistricting. It is completely, not only is it totally anti-democratic, it is debilitating in terms of political power, because that also impacts the congressional redistricting. In New Hampshire, Republicans regained their gerrymandered majorities. They have now full control over redistricting in New Hampshire. In New York, it remains to be seen if New York Democrats will have a supermajority, so they will be able to redistrict. In North Carolina, Republicans gained seats, and they are possibly set up to regain a supremacy on the North Carolina Supreme Court. Oregon, the Democrats failed to get a 2/3 majority. Texas, Virginia, the story is all the way. Virginia is one of the few places where Democrats are doing okay. And of course, they have an independent commission there. Democrats are faced with this failure down ballot, and there is finger pointing. And the finger pointing has, there was basically an attack by folks in the Democratic leadership, Clyburn. We talked about, I think it was on Friday, the phone call that was leaked and was actually listened to by reporters where Abigail Spanberger and others criticized AOC, the squad, and just the general idea that Democrats would in any way be, I don't know that there's no legislation, there's no policies that have been adopted by the Democrats, but in any way be sympathetic to things like Black Lives Matter, sympathetic to the idea of decreasing police budgets and providing those resources for other organizations and cities to basically make the policy portfolio or the responsibilities of the cops less. Then you had John Kasich goes on television and look, I did not put John Kasich on the DNC and give him as much speaking time as any other Democrat. This is the problem that comes with highlighting and promoting things like Project Lincoln. Of course, the Republicans got more votes than they did last time. There's no evidence that Project Lincoln changed a single person's vote or John Kasich changed a single person's vote. But somehow John Kasich, a lifelong Republican, former Fox host, former and maybe current, frankly, Wall Street guy, is out there, and now he's explaining what the Democrats have to do. Clip number 10.
Now is the time for Democrats, and I believe Joe Biden will do this, to begin to listen to what the other half of the country has had to say. But we have to listen to what those folks, those Republicans, all across this country has had to say. The best thing that's happened to Joe Biden is the fact that the United States Senate is either going to be Republican or very close, and the far left can push him as hard as they want. And frankly, the Democrats have to make it clear to the far left that they almost cost him this election. And that congresswoman from Virginia warned the Democrats, you want to talk about defunding the police, you'll have no support. And I think this is an opportunity for Biden to talk about the center right and the center left of this country and what can be achieved. Because we have enormous problems with debt, Social Security, Medicare, health care. Little steps, little steps. One other thing, one Democrat told me at some point, if they'd have been more clear in rejecting the hard left, they would have appealed more to Americans who I believe essentially live in the middle. So I think actually he's in a better position today because being pulled from the left isn't going to work. They will not get those things done.
This is, first off, understand that when John Kasich says we have debt and we've got to deal with Medicare and Social Security, he is talking about cutting those. The two most popular programs in the entire country. The staple of that has been basically keeping Democrats in the game to the extent that they're in the game for almost 100 years. That should be enough to discount John Kasich. Period. End of story. But the idea that the Democrats were in any way inhibited by these policies, there's just no evidence of it. Zero evidence. If Joe Biden, first of all, there was no Democrats out there who didn't have enough resources. No moderate Democrats, for sure. No centrist Democrats. No Republican-leaning Democrats who didn't have the resources to push back on false narratives, if that's what they wanted to do. Joe Biden was able to do it. They could have done it. But the fascinating thing is, too, is that AOC was interviewed by the New York Times. And what she had to say is being completely mischaracterized. And it's fascinating to watch this. She gave a critique. And one of the things that I've always said about AOC is that there are two elements about her that are particularly hopeful in my mind. And one is her ideology. She is full-throated in her support for things like Green New Deal, things like Medicare for all, et cetera, et cetera. But even if you put aside ideological differences that people might have, and even if you want to argue that, well, she is in a district that is made up of something like 70% working class folks and 80% people of color. Even if your argument is that those policies won't sell in other locations, I don't know what those locations might be or why they're necessary for Democrats to win. And even if you also wanted to say, like, well, I mean, the fact that they would elect her over Joe Crowley and also elect her and fend off her challenge significantly may be indicative of a dynamic that, things didn't change that much in 2 years in her district. It could be just that people have been holding power and not providing what their constituents actually want. But putting that aside from an ideological perspective, her critique of the Democratic Party is not an ideological one, at least in the context of these elections. Her critique of the Democratic Party is that their failure to exercise best practices and to do politics correctly. Remember, the DCCC punished a lot of organizations that worked with primary people. And so they ended up essentially blacklisting some of the best for-profit political firms, the ones that have the best sense of how to motivate voters, how to communicate with voters on particularly on digital platforms. And what she's saying, if you read this New York Times interview, and this is what she's saying. She's saying two things. One, quote, "We also learned that progressive policies do not hurt candidates." She's not suggesting that it is a panacea to adopt Medicare for all. She is simply saying they don't hurt candidates. Every single candidate that co-sponsored Medicare for all in a swing district kept their seat. Now, again, co-sponsoring, you just sign up for it. It's not like you run on it necessarily, but that means it's not a liability. We also know that co-sponsoring the Green New Deal was not a sinker. Mike Levin was an original co-sponsor of the legislation. He kept his seat. In other words, if you think you support a policy that is the right policy, but you are worried that it's a liability, we have proof now that it's not a liability. It may not be a panacea. It may not make you win your district, but it shouldn't be an inhibition to you winning that district. She goes on to say, I've been starting to look into actual functioning of these campaigns. So she's shifting here. It is now about the mechanics of actually politicking. The thing is, I've been unseating Democrats for 2 years. She's been working with Justice Democrats. I have been defeating Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee-run campaigns for 2 years. That's how I got to Congress. That's how we elected Ayanna Pressley. That's how Jamal Bowman won. That's how Cori Bush won. And so we know about extreme vulnerabilities in how Democrats run campaigns. She is now speaking as a campaign runner. This is not an ideological issue for her. Some of this is criminal. It's malpractice. Connor Lamb spent $2,000 on Facebook the week before the election. I don't think anybody who's not on the internet in a real way in the year of our Lord 2020 and loses an election can blame anyone else when they're not really on the internet. And she says, if the fact of the matter is you're not spending $200,000 on Facebook with fundraising, persuasion, volunteer recruitment, get out the vote the week before the election, you are not firing on all cylinders. And not a single one of these campaigns were firing on all cylinders. She is criticizing the Democrats for political malpractice, not on ideological grounds. These folks are pointing toward Republican messaging. They feel killed them, right? But why were you so vulnerable to that attack? If you're not door knocking, if you're not on the internet, if your main points of reliance are TV and mail, you're not running a campaign on all cylinders. I just don't see how anyone could be making ideological claims when they didn't run a full-fledged campaign. Here's the dirty little secret, folks. If your campaign buys a lot of ads, if your campaign buys a lot of mailers, your campaign consultants, your advisors, they make a ton of money. If your campaign goes and knocks on a bunch of doors, if your campaign buys a bunch of ads on Facebook, you do not make a ton of money. When you buy TV ads, you as an advisor, you get 15% off the top. A lot of times it's you're buying ads from your own agency that is an outside agency that is yours or your partner's. What she is talking about is a sclerotic Democratic Party that is running campaigns that may or may not have been successful years ago, decades ago. And they're continuing to do so because people are making money off of it. And they're in the position of making those decisions.
Did you see Connor Lamb responded saying AOC doesn't know what she's talking about? This is what Tim Tagara says. He says she doesn't have any idea how we ran the campaign or what we spent, but it's public. He may not have known that. He spent $8,000 in the last month and $1,331 in the last 4 days. So she was right.
He came out. He was interviewed. He did not deny that he spent so little on Facebook. He doesn't even realize that information is public. Tim Takaris was Bernie Sanders' was his digital fundraiser. So what we're dealing with is a Democratic establishment. There's an ideological argument to this, but put that aside for a moment. We're dealing with a Democratic establishment that has become ossified. Ossified? Help me out here, Matt. That has become...
Yeah, that's right.
Ossified. And they continue to rely on a model of running campaigns that is failing over and over again and is being maintained only because those people in the positions of making these decisions are making a lot of money off it. We will have more to say on this in the coming days. Tomorrow, David Dayen will be on to talk about what Joe Biden can do even if he doesn't have that Senate. But if you're in Georgia or you're around Georgia, you know people in Georgia, or you can go to Georgia, very important runoffs. All right, and we'll head into the fun half in just a moment. I think that is our time. Joining us in the fun half, Emma will show up. We'll be talking about all sorts of different things. Just a reminder, it's your support that helps this program stay alive. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you're not only supporting the free show, but you're getting all sorts of new material in the fun half. So check that out. Also, don't forget AM Quickie. amquickie.com. You can sign up. You get more information. You get 7 minutes of headlines in the morning. Also, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. What else? This week on Nomi's show should be pretty awesome. Nomi really understands this dynamic of the of this basically this juggernaut that makes money off of campaigns. I mean, look, it's the hardest thing in the world to tell someone whose job it is, whose money depends upon something, that what they're doing is wrong. This is in every business. So this is not just, a question of like politics or that there's, some type of unique corruption here. It's simply the reality of this is the way that they've always done it. And it's much easier and, much more profitable to say, oh, no, this is a question of ideology. And then just basically say, we're going to go with a 50-50 chance of us winning. The Democrats should have done better. They should have done better in these races. There is no possible way you could run an enterprise like the Democratic Party without believing that they should have done better. There was a failure to brand the Democratic Party down ticket, true. But just on basic practices, they failed. They failed because they're protecting a certain ideological bent. We'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. But you can check out Nomi's show. She's not doing it live today. But youtube.com/The Nomi Key Show. Nomi Key Show. Also, don't forget, check out The Antifada. Patreon.com/The Antifada. Matt, what's happening on TMBS?
We'll be doing a TMBS tomorrow night. I'm not sure who the guest is, but look forward to that. Also, people subscribe, twitch.tv/literary hangover. I'll be more active on that, too. A lot of changes coming in the things I'm producing, but I don't want to say more than that. So,
ooh, really? Really?
It's going to be a transition period, but it's going to be fun. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to give a shofar for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They won. Ding dong. The witch is dead. Hopefully, the new witch will be better.
Happy neoliberal victory day, everybody.
There you go. Well, I mean, it's neoliberal also lost. Neoliberal plus massive corruption and incompetence lost. So,
no, it's true.
So maybe we'll be able to maybe we'll be able to get through I don't know if we're gonna, this winter's I think it's sort of set in stone on some level, but we'll see. But for the next pandemic that comes over the summer next year, we'll be in better shape. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. We'll be right back.
This week.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jamie.
I think she might have just lost her internet.
All right. We'll be back in just a moment with the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5.
5 times. 847-906-501-457-238-56-27. 1/2. 5/8. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance. Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Did we lose Jamie?
Yeah, she's still not back.
Okay.
What? Lighting's better? Improved?
Lighting's better. Yes, the lighting's better. Mike's a little better.
There we go. A little bit, but you know.
Yeah, it's still a little weird. We're gonna get you a different mic, I think, for that. All right, Emma. Welcome. Good to see you. How did you celebrate? Did you celebrate at all this weekend?
I mean, yeah, I had some champagne, but it was fairly anticlimactic. I feel like if, you and I were following this and we're pretty certain by Thursday or Friday early that it was a foregone conclusion that Biden was going to win. And I don't feel warm and fuzzy feelings about Biden winning. I do enjoy watching Trump lose and flail. But that the kind of Schadenfreude doesn't spark such jubilance in me that I need to take to the streets or anything like that.
Yeah, I think I experienced. I have to say that when I've told this story before. When Bill Clinton won, I remember where I was at the time. I was Mark Maron's intern, essentially. I mean, not really, but I would hang out with him at coffee shops and watch him make himself sick on cigarettes so that he could quit. It was a very odd time in his life and mine, for that matter. But we were at Cobb's Comedy Club, and they announced it. And everybody was very, very excited. The call came that night, and everybody was super excited. And I was looking around, going like,
sure, yeah,
yes, but this time around, I didn't go out. I mean, I was in charge. Saul was excited that Donald Trump had lost, but he doesn't want to go out and see crowds. Neither do I, frankly, in this situation, particularly not for that. And
I'm usually anti-crowd in general, and then on top of it, the pandemic makes it's just an excuse to continue with my, nature.
Somewhat agoraphobia. And but I also, I just am not, I was not going to, that was not the reason why I was going to go out and brave the crowds. But I felt that I was, but I did feel like a palpable relief. I had a lot of people call me and said they felt like a palpable relief. But that scares me too, because there's, so much of what was bad about Trump is still with us and will have a tremendous amount of durability going forward. And I am worried, and not so much with the people who listen to this program, because I don't think you listen or watch a political show 3 or 4 or 5 days a week, and then you're like, well, now Donald Trump's gone, I'm going to go. I'm not going to follow politics anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But broadly speaking, I'm worried that people are going to go to sleep and not realize. And part of that is, again, the failure of the Democrats to make it clear that, Republicans are the problem. And they're just going to allow this to happen. I mean, there's a certain sequence that has to take place here. And you got to get the Republicans out of the picture in many respects so that we can move on to a different fight within the Democratic Party. And I think that's why, that's the thing about, I think what AOC does that I appreciate is that she sequences, when she came out in this interview, she's sequencing, you got to do some basic politicking first and defeat Republicans. And then we can move on to this internecine fight.
Matt, did you want to say something?
Well, I just wanted to say I was at the laundromat, and I was the first person in the laundromat to see on the TV screen that they had called it for Biden. And I pointed, and then everybody else started noticing it too. And then all of a sudden you hear from outside, this is in Brooklyn, right? People just cheering. And it was an amazing moment. I mean, I think that is what is important to emphasize what Sam's saying about, going back to sleep. But I would say, relative to 2008, I think I was entirely asleep after Obama won. I was just mocking people. I still remember being in the dorm room and just going up to people who I knew voted for McCain and just mocking them. And I'm still doing some of that here, but with a sense of it's not that I like Joe Biden. It's just, this is pure schadenfreude.
Yeah, I feel like there was some of that liberal attitude kind of remains in some leftist circles where I think it's entirely counterproductive, where you're mocking and making fun of Trump supporters or feeling kind of superior. Whereas I've kind of shied away from that at this point because there's not much to feel superior about in the Democratic Party, as evidenced by the losses in the House to a Republican Party led by Donald Trump, the most incompetent idiot we've seen in politics for a long time. So I don't feel pride to be on the other side, if that makes sense.
Well, look, mockery is fun. It keeps our spirits up, right? There are a lot of people to mock in the Republican Party. There are a lot of people to mock in the Democratic Party. But, we got to do more than that. And Democrat or Republican, we have our work cut out for us because we know Republicanism is not, in fact, the only problem that is causing all of these things. Black Lives Matter started under Barack Obama. Think about Occupy Wall Street. Think about all of these movements that blossomed when a Democrat was in charge and people were like, wow, none of these problems are going away. Maybe it's not enough just to have a Democrat in charge.
Well, but it's exactly why you need a Democrat in charge. I mean, that's my entire argument is that having Republicans on the playing field obscure what the fight is. And so, the failure to defeat them is particularly vexing because there's going to, we're going to go through a period of time where there's a reason why Kasich likes the fact he says this is the best thing that can happen to Joe Biden, that he has a split Senate and House. Now,
a team of rivals, if you will.
In
a team of people who agree on most things.
Well, but in yesteryear, I mean, assume take Mitch McConnell out of the project, which I still don't think that there's enough societal sort of recognition of just how malign a force he is. For in the past, John Kasich is talking in the same way that Andrew Cuomo wanted the IDC, because what it does is it insulates Andrew Cuomo from the progressives in New York. Andrew Cuomo does not want a supermajority in the New York Senate because he does not want his veto overridden. Andrew Cuomo wants the fig leaf of having Republicans or a rogue caucus
preventing him from signing legislation that it's quite clear the vast majority of New Yorkers want. So when you get rid of the Republicans, you either get one of two things. You either get more progressive legislation, or it becomes completely clear who is and, which forces are the ones standing in front of it and blocking it. And so, like just even the complete disintegration of the argument about debt, of concern about the debt and deficit, is a huge liability for people like Nancy Pelosi, right? Because it used to be, we have to be fiscally responsible to appeal to all those Republican voters. But we just had 70 million people come out and vote for a president who exploded the debt and deficit, never said a single word about it. That is no longer an operative principle in the context of elections. I also happen to think that it's, from a policy standpoint, it's always been a joke. But nobody can deploy that anymore as a way to get elected. Nobody cares about that as an election. In fact, I would argue very few people care, broadly speaking, about any of the issues that we talk about when it comes to electing people.
Well, just quickly to touch on your point, though, about the ideal situation for Biden being the Republicans holding on to the Senate and there being this kind of bipartisan thing. That's what happens when the representatives of the party that's ostensibly the left party don't believe in much except the aura of compromise and the fetishization of both parties coming together. When you don't have an ideological driver of policy and things that you want to implement and a vision for the country that moves in a leftist direction, and you had Obama who loved the concept of compromise and Biden who loves it even more, then it's empty, and it leaves the door open for ideologues like Mitch McConnell or the far right in this country.
Yep. And it doesn't make me feel good when I see quotes from folks like that guy on Biden's transition team, Kaufman, saying that, oh, yeah, we need to exert some fiscal discipline. We're going to be deficit hawks. We have to do austerity. Don't worry about all the shit that we promised. But yeah, on the topic of Republicans reaching across the aisle or whatever, that should not even be up for debate. I remember seeing, I was in Pennsylvania over the weekend, celebrating the victory of Joseph Robinette Biden by just dumping my brain out all over the state that he was born in.
I love that he has a woman's middle name, right? Like that's just kind of, I love Robinette. It's just a fun fact.
I like it too. It kind of makes me relate to him a little bit more, but I saw these giant billboards all over the highway that clearly the Democrats spent a lot of money on. And it was pictures of grizzled Pennsylvania looking ass dudes saying like, I'm a Republican and I'm pro-life and I'm voting for Joe Biden. I'm like, no, you're not. Fuck off.
But you know what? That to me, fine. Like particularly on those social issues, if they want to move people that way, that's fine. Because there's it's basically a Republican saying, that's a Republican saying, despite the fact that I have some closely held beliefs, Donald Trump is horrible, so I'm going to vote for him. That, to me, is different than the Democrats saying we've got to be quiet about certain policies when we're running, or that certain policies that are held by AOC in New York are inhibiting me in fact, it's the opposite of, Connor Lamb says, like, we can't have people in New York talking about Medicare for all because that's going to hurt me in Pennsylvania. Well, there's a sign on the side of the highway basically saying, despite the fact that Joe Biden believes that a woman has a right to choose, you're a Republican, you should vote for him anyways. I mean, that is exactly the messaging that we should have. Is that
really? I'm just saying, I think it's kind of a bad strategy to try to get Republicans to vote for Joe Biden, considering they did not, and they voted for him at lower rates than they voted for Hillary Clinton.
I listen, I don't think I think it's a mistake to not attempt, but the point is, what do you have to give up is the problem. I have no problem saying, hey, just, an ad that says Joe Biden's, despite the fact I'm against abortion, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. Fine. That's exactly the way that the Republicans should vote for Joe Biden. Despite the fact that I don't agree with his policies, I'll vote for him. I don't know if that's going to work or not, and I don't know how much is spent on a billboard, but the part that's problematic is when Democrats have to change their positions to suit that guy. What would be bad is an ad that says, Joe Biden's not really in favor of a woman's right to choose, and so I'm a Republican, I'm going to vote for him. That's a bad ad. I don't know if the one that you're talking about is effective, but it's not damaging to the Democrats. What Connor Lamb is suggesting is damaging to the Democrats, and there is no evidence. And I don't even have to make the assertion that Medicare for All would help Connor Lamb. It may not. I don't know. But there's no evidence that it hurts Connor Lamb. Certainly, there's a lot more evidence that spending $1,500 on Facebook 2 weeks out or in a week out from an election, it's malpractice. It's malpractice.
Well, it's also just circular logic because they don't want to try for Medicare for All, even when they have failures, and then they blame the prospect of agreeing to Medicare for All on the failures. So, there's no way for them to actually embrace that ideology because they choose to hide behind the fact that AOC mentioned Medicare for All in New York, that hurt down ballot races in Minnesota and Pennsylvania or whatever. Could it have been any of the other multitude of strategies that you actively implemented, as opposed to the theoretical ones that you're saying would hurt other candidates?
I challenge anybody in the entire country to show me the candidate who won running on the subsidizing of COBRA, which was the plan in the HEROES Act for how Democrats were going to deal with people losing their health insurance.
By the way, that perspective or that strategy, it would be way better and more effective messaging wise to run as a Republican, because it sounds so and say, we're just going to let the market decide almost, because the COBRA thing sounds so bureaucratic and just alienating to people, the exact kind of thing that they hate about government. That half measure is weaker than the full free market messaging.
Totally agree. Let's just turn just one moment back to what, we'll mix in our criticism of the Democrats with also some just enjoying the flailing around that is going on the right. It really is stunning. And I listened to a lot of talk radio this weekend, and sadly, none of the big ones are on, during when it's called. But some of the local guys I listened to were really having a tough time with this. They were really, really having a tough time because they're talking about all of this fraud that supposedly happened, multi-state fraud. And they don't have a single example of it. Not a single example. Like they are, I've been in this position as someone who is a propagandist of sorts, where you're basically supposed to be putting out the information on behalf of the ideology or the party or the entity or the candidate that you're supporting, and they give you nothing. Here's Roy Blunt. And the only thing he can say is, and this is yesterday, it is 5 days after the supposed obvious fraud that has been committed, and he's still saying we really should have some evidence now.
It's Democrat and Republican. I've spoken with Secretary of State's Democrat and Republican state officials over the last several days. Mm-hmm. They've said they've seen no widespread evidence of any kind of fraud at all. Joe Biden has won this election. Why can't you acknowledge it?
Well, what I said on Friday and what Chris Christie said just a few minutes ago on this show is it's time for the president's lawyers to present the facts, and then it's time for those facts to speak for themselves. It's going to be much easier to work toward the kind of transition we want. Look at the inauguration, which I'm going to have the honor of chairing again this time, and bringing the country together if everybody feels like we went through a process and everybody was heard. Every legal vote was counted. Every illegal vote was challenged and not counted. We come to a conclusion. I think that happens pretty quickly. I've spoken with Secretary of State's.
So there you have it. There you have it. He called for it on Friday. That clip was from Sunday. I mean, you would think if there was a whole host of evidence about voter fraud anywhere in the country, that they would present it to the American public. Like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on, everybody. I know everybody thinks that Joe Biden's the president, but wait a second. We have some evidence here.
No, they have to go on cable news first, right? We saw this with Lou Dobbs and the fact that they said, well, I could be presenting this evidence, but I have to go on your show. I mean, they're really prioritizing. Yeah, they're really prioritizing cable hits over presenting this mountain of evidence to the courts.
I also it's time. It's time to put up or shut up. And by time, I mean this winter.
Right, exactly. We need at least, there needs to be, we need to see evidence within at least 3 to 6 weeks of this voter fraud. Somebody wants random Rush. It would be worth actually listening to Rush.
I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I feel like if Trump hadn't telegraphed this strategy and wasn't hammering it, then you wouldn't have seen the likes of Ted Cruz, who tries to be sly and slick, or Lindsey Graham and all of these other folks challenging the legitimacy of the votes to this degree, because there's zero evidence and they're just following the leader, and it makes them look so silly.
I mean, I think I totally agree. I think the only thing is that for their voters, they need to do it.
Right.
They're dealing, I mean, like, I think,
it's a hostage situation. They have to do whatever Trump says.
Here is in Michigan, and some of these states are run by Republicans. Here is a Republican city clerk in Michigan. I mean, this is the problem that they're having. Every time they come up with something that they think is going to be the evidence, it falls apart almost immediately. It's like, I don't know, it's like literally like a wet piece of bread. They go to pick it up, and then all of a sudden it just disintegrates in their hand. Here is a Michigan city clerk. They're still hammering all of this on right-wing talk radio, talking about what the Republicans have seized upon as evidence of widespread fraud. Clip number 5.
My name is Tina Barton. As a clerk, my job is to run the elections fairly and securely. All ballots are and have been accounted for. There were no missing ballots. The accusation that 2,000 ballots were found is categorically false. As a Republican, I am disturbed that this is intentionally being mischaracterized to undermine the election process. This was an isolated mistake that was quickly rectified once realized. Every voter should have complete confidence in our voting system. Every vote that was cast was counted accurately, and there is a paper ballot backup. I stand by our reported results.
Now, you know what is
as a clerk,
all right, put that, you know what's really disturbing about that, Emma?
What?
Is everybody watches that and they think, oh, okay, so there was no voter fraud. But also, people should also know that the city clerk of the city of Rochester Hills, Michigan, is the seat of the deep state. Just about everything that happens with the deep state runs through the city clerk.
The central
Rochester
hub.
Hills.
The central hub. That's where they all meet in like some sort of bat cave thing.
It's the CIA that spies on the CIA, is there?
Exactly.
Oh, you solved it. I do want to point out the obvious point that if there was mass voter fraud, wow, the libs and Soros, they did a really bad job with the Republicans gaining House seats and potentially holding on to the Senate. I mean, I guess it must be some deep state conspiracy where Republicans secretly hate Trump only, and Republicans and Dems came together so Biden would be supplanted as the Antifa president. I don't know. I have to work that part out.
Well, you can't make it look too obvious,
That's
right.
The point. Jamie's right. The reason why you don't take back the Senate, and the reason why you don't take back any state houses, and the reason why you actually give up a couple of seats in Congress is to hide your tracks.
Right. And then the next time around, that's when they'll just take back the Senate, but then give the House back to the Republicans. Because
the big debate that the Democrats had internally when they were planning and when Soros, was talking about this huge election fraud,
was maybe the best way to cover up the election fraud is to have everybody lose.
Oh.
That way, no one would know they were changing votes. Joe Biden goes down, all the senators go down, the House, the state houses, nobody can see the election fraud.
And Joe Jorgensen is installed as president of the United States.
Exactly. Just the only thing is that all those illegal immigrants will have the opportunity to vote, and in a losing cause.
That probably is how the Democrats would do it, honestly.
That is sort of, I think on some level, that is sort of like indicative of
Every good conspiracy theory has a kernel of truth.
Let's go to Matt. There's no way you can do a random rush, is there? You don't know how to get to.
I can look. Give me a sec.
See if you can find it. Let's do some IMs. What strategies will progressives use going forward? I hope they will use the good images of FDR, JFK, MLK, and LBJ, use the same soaring language in their speeches, and also use all the dirty tricks, rhetorical, statistical, and otherwise, against corporate Dems and Republicans, because unadulterated truth and decency does not win politically. Even progressives, I feel like, are not dirty enough in their campaigns, which I think future Dems should be. Do you agree? I mean, LBJ and JFK cheated their way to election wins, and look what they accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know that we should cheat in those things, but I think Democrats need to get a lot more aggressive.
I think both I think both of those examples, though, I would characterize it more as aggression than cheating and not backing down and using all the rules in the playbook to their favor.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I would add to this is it can't just be about what the candidates do and what the leadership of the party does. Progress happens because of social movements on the ground, pushing these politicians to do what the people want them to do. And without that, we're really not going to see that much progress.
Without a doubt. We need to get them in a position, though, that they actually have control over the levers of power without having the opportunity to pretend like they're being thwarted by a third party. I mean, that is that's the most disappointing thing about a split between Biden and the Senate. I mean, the material benefits, but it is a put up or shut up time for the Democrats. And this basically punts that. And I'm afraid is going to lead to a disaster in 2022, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. All right, let's try random rush, shall we? This is how this goes. I will listen to, he's not? Okay. Oh, he is? All right. So I will listen to 60 seconds of Rush Limbaugh and respond in 90 seconds. It's an oldie, but a goodie. Right now it is 1:37 p.m. Let's hear it.
You're really going to see is that Biden's going to win days later. You just have to have patience and don't let anybody tell you it's fraud, because it really isn't.
Even though it was.
Right.
So your point is that they ran a psycho ops operation on everybody, telling them what was going to happen, and then it happened.
That's not what that's called.
And they condition people to let them know this isn't fraud. This isn't fraud. This is just how this election is because of these times we're living in. Blame it on 2020.
The year 2020, right? Whatever. Well, they can do that. I don't care. I couldn't care less what they say it was. I couldn't care less if they ran a psyops operation on us. All I care about is uprooting what happened. That's all I want to do. We've got to find out what happened, because we all believe Donald Trump won this election. We all believe that he won it.
Okay, stop. So there's Rush Limbaugh again promoting Rush Limbaugh. I get 90 seconds now. That's Rush Limbaugh promoting the theory that there was widespread cheating and basically letting this caller carry some of his water by saying this was a huge psyop, as it were.
Did he say psycho-op at first?
Psycho-op? Did he say psycho-op?
That's why I laughed.
It is sort of a psycho-op at some level, where the whole media and all these pollsters were basically preparing all of you for Joe Biden's win, so that when it happened, it didn't seem so strange. Now, of course,
doesn't explain how come we all thought the Democrats were going to pick up 5 or 6 seats in the Senate and the House. But again, the Democrats, when they did this whole fraud, did that so that you would think that they didn't commit fraud when it comes to Joe Biden. You got to give a little bit. It's like,
Yeah, leaving power on the table is the perfect alibi.
Exactly. Which makes this all the more suspicious. This would be far more believable if all the polls had showed that Donald Trump was going to run away with it. And then if Biden wins, we're surprised, and they wouldn't let that happen because they wouldn't want the scrutiny. It's all a psycho op, as you can see. So there it is, ladies and gentlemen. And that is, I did it in 85 seconds.
Right. Well, I will add that they also say, that we all know Trump won this election. Basically, they feel that Trump won this election. This is the crowd of facts over feelings. They have no evidence presented to them, but there you go.
Hey, since we're talking about psycho ops, here is one of the responses we saw to Joe Biden winning. This is going to prove to all of you it's irrelevant. We're all just here by the grace of God, and if God decides that we shouldn't be here, we won't be. Joe Biden's election's irrelevant, although, of course, unless it was Donald Trump winning, and then it was actually God's act. But here is Kenneth Copeland, the televangelist in Texas, in a megachurch, showing us a proper response to Joe Biden winning.
The media said what? The media said Joe Biden's president. Ha 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 The media said what?
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, is that laugh therapy? Remember that fad where everyone would all...
It's like Rolfing.
Right. They'll all be in or laughing yoga, where you all make each other laugh, first pretend to laugh. It's supposed to be therapeutic. Maybe it's very new age.
I'm not familiar.
It's like the evil version of that. I don't know. I think
he looks like an actual demon.
I think it's funny and fitting that he has Cope right there in his name.
Yeah, exactly.
Right up on that stage going, I am not mad. I am laughing. I am not owned. You are owned.
That would have been awesome to see him just like pull that laughter, that fake laughter, right into a cry. It would have been the ultimate move there.
You all remember Copeland as the guy who bought the private jet from, I think, Tyler Perry, and got a really good deal on it, so he had to buy it, so he could avoid traveling with the demons in
That's the same guy who said that, yeah, he couldn't. Was it the other guy, the other pastor who bought that third private jet because when he was flying commercial, there were too many souls in there, so he couldn't accurately hear God that close to the heavens. It was basically like too many synapses going on.
That's why I got interference. That's why I got sound canceling headphones for when I travel.
Right, so you can hear God
exactly
echoing.
Calling from a 478 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Good afternoon, Sam. This is Psycho Ops Operative 46321. Also known as Jeff in Georgia. Hello.
Jeff in Georgia. How are you, Jeff?
Hey, man, I'm doing good. Listen, I'm not actually, well, I mean, I lied. I'm not doing so good because I've never eaten crow before, and I didn't really know how to prepare it, and so I just kind of ate it, with a little salt on the grill, and it's terrible, man, but I got to eat so much crow because I feel like I got on your show last time and just face planted in front of everyone.
Well, you said that Georgia was not going to come through for Biden, and that there wouldn't be runoffs.
Yeah. I mean, I was right about the runoffs. My error was, and I feel really silly just saying this, but and it still pisses me off. that 200,000 vote number, when I said there's 200,000 votes left to count, I didn't get that from a projection. I didn't make that up either. I didn't even get it from a news source. I got it from the Secretary of State gobhole. and I know maybe it's silly for me to think they would never lie or misrepresent something so basic and fundamental as just the number of votes left to be counted. But of course they did. And of course I believed them. And of course there were more than 200,000 votes left to count. And that's why Biden is going to win our electoral votes in all likelihood, unless they get really lucky with some court challenges and start throwing out heaps and heaps and heaps. I am pleased that I was so charming and persuasive on the air, though, that none of you pushed back on me at all, which is great.
I mean, look, it was really surprising. There has been, you would not, the whole election was surprising, right? I mean, nobody anticipated that we would see this level of turnout. I mean, there was an extra, I think at the end of this, there's going to be an extra like 20, 30 million votes. That's extraordinary.
I think in Georgia, it's high 60s, approaching 70% turnout of the general, which is huge for us. I like your take on the runoffs. We're not looking so good, but I don't know what's going to happen. I will say this, though, to the audience and to everyone. I mean, if you're the kind of person who's got enough change in your pocket to give money to political campaigns, first of all, congratulations. I'm glad you're doing so well. But second of all, be careful about who you give that money to in Georgia. I guarantee you're going to see a lot of kind of fly-by-night sort of operations just pop up and say, hey, you really care about Georgia? Well, guess what? Like, you can give us money and we'll do something with it. And what they'll do with it is end up paying themselves. So not everyone's going to do that, of course. But if you're looking to give, I would probably give directly to the campaigns, or just be really careful about which operation you want to write a check to or anything like that, because I really do think that this is a prime opportunity for the worst elements of the Democratic Party to self-deal.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go on Twitter or Instagram to find the place you're going to contribute to. I mean, personally, I would give to, giving through Act Blue is usually a fairly decent, like there's a certain, you're not going to have total, frauds via Act Blue. I mean, Stacey Abrams has a big investment. Her organization has a big investment in winning these two races, right? Like, I mean, Stacey Abrams, if I don't know if she, how much of the credit she deserves or doesn't deserve. Like, there's been changes in motor registration and whatnot, but I suspect that if you've been contacted by an organization that is registering, your propensity to vote is higher than if you're just doing it when you get your license, right? I mean, so, because you want obviously to register people, but you want people to turn out. And you look at an organization like that where, right as it is now, Stacey Abrams becomes a, as much of an important figure she was in the politics before, like now, right? I mean, she's got a lot of cachet, and putting aside from an ideological perspective, where she is on that spectrum, et cetera, just in terms of getting the vote out. I mean, it's a big deal. And
I'm a pretty ideologically guy, and I could not agree more that, especially in this particular case, I have some problems with Stacey Abrams. And I sometimes cringe a little bit when I hear people praise her a little too hard, I think, because she's not exactly what everyone thinks that she is. But in terms of her ability to engage voters, motivate voters, register voters, get voters to the polls in Georgia, there's no denying that she's queen at that. She is.
Yeah, and just quick,
a lot of muscle behind her.
Yeah, and my point too on her, like, again, we can critique all the Bloomberg ties, and I have issues with her too, but on this alone, you got to be fair and say she at least played a massive part in kind of this Herculean effort here. And I saw the Politico article where some of Biden's cabinet positions and appointees were being floated, and Tom Perez was on there again for labor secretary, and I almost would like if Perez was snatched away from the DNC and Stacey Abrams headed it, just because she's someone the party establishment would accept, and she could bring organizing there. Whereas the party currently is so reliant on the same old consultant culture that's just getting everybody rich and not making effective choices in terms of getting out the vote.
Yeah,
I do think it would be a little bit different at a national level, because the sorts of Georgians that you can register and get to vote Democrat are a little bit different than the sorts of people you might get to register and vote Democrat in all over the nation, because
sure,
it's still a relatively conservative state with and the battle's all in the suburbs, which means that you're going to be going out to the suburbs to do that stuff. And I'm not saying obviously people who live in the burbs need to vote, but so do other people, and other people also have some interest. And there are lots of voters everywhere in this country to vote for. We have an unprecedented number of votes, it's true, but with still the largest block of people in America are basically totally disengaged from politics in any way. They don't think it affects them, and they don't care about it, and they don't want to talk about it because it makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, looking down the line, obviously it's good that you can get more people to vote, but you still need to get people politicized around certain issues, and you still have to convince people that better things are possible, right? Otherwise, you get a situation like all those people in the exit polls on Super Tuesday who said they support Medicare for all, or even socialism as a concept, but they still voted for Joe Biden because they believed that he was the only one who could beat Trump. So we need to fight that kind of depoliticization as well as getting people to vote. Otherwise, Joe Biden's going to be the limit of their imaginations.
That's not necessarily depoliticization, is it? I mean, it's just simply they're making a strategic, that to me sounds that they're making a strategic guess on who the best candidates.
Well, I would define that as a kind of depoliticization if we are looking at it as an investment in things as they are and a lack of the belief that the world can be changed, specifically through politics. So yeah,
I can believe
that sets a limit on people's aspirations.
Than new voters, though. I mean, I'm not saying those people don't need working on, but I think those people are already kind of engaged in the process and already have.
But Jeff, here's the problem.
When you tell them a story, you're gonna have to knock down that story before you can tell them a new one. It's
yes,
gonna be more work for you.
I mean, I think I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that. I'm just not convinced that that example is really an example of what you're talking about. But I'll also say, like, one of the things that is clear too here is that, we had a massive jump in the number of voters in this election. And it's probably not where we should be, but I mean, 60, 70%, we haven't had election numbers like this. And I'll let you go, Jeff. I appreciate the call.
Thank you so much. You guys have a good one now.
You too. Don't worry about that crow. This is the biggest election turnout we've had since 1908. Projected to be around almost 67%. Now that's pretty high. I mean, we should go to, we should go to like 85%. I think 90% would be good. I mean, obviously 100% would be optimal, but I mean, to have voluntary voting on, and I think clearly a big part of it is, hey, when you make things easier for people to vote, they vote. Like when the costs of voting are not that high, when you can actually like easily mail in your ballot, or you can go at a time that's convenient for you, people vote. That's pretty impressive. And you look back, we just jumped 7 percentage points from 2016. It's going to be close to 9 percentage points from 2012. Even 2008, it's going to be 6 percentage points higher. We should be getting up to 70, 80%. But the point is that the assumption that I think I certainly have operated under is, if you're going to have that kind of jump in voters, that Democrats are going to clean up. And that apparently is not necessarily true. That they're, now I don't know what it is that, no one can say for sure what it is that motivates, an extra, I don't know, whatever it is, 5-10 million Trump supporters from coming out of the woodwork.
Yeah, I mean, isn't the difference between 2018 and 2020 just that Trump is a huge turnout machine for that?
No, I don't think so. Oh,
No.
you mean in terms of like the trajectory? I mean, it's hard to say. Comparing 2018 could give you a sense that people would come out, but there was record numbers for Republicans and Democrats in 2018 as well. Right. They broke records too. It's just Democrats outpaced them, and that's what happened with this election too.
Well, could we? I mean, we'll eventually get the data, but the focus on suburban white voters, basically, would they, the ones who flipped from maybe Trump in 2016 to Biden now, which was clearly the focus of the campaign, I think a misplaced focus, could those voters also be high propensity voters to split their ticket and vote for Biden and then vote for the Republican candidate? Could that have been part of the schism that we saw despite higher turnout?
I mean, it's possible. I think what we're going to find out is the votes that you're talking about are going to be, that's the misogyny vote, right? Like those voters who come out, and I think white males come out and basically, they said, I last time around, I just couldn't vote for Clinton. I didn't like Trump, but I couldn't vote for Clinton. And I think, for no other, I don't know what the other reason is, like Joe Biden's just,
I just like him more and I can't explain it.
I don't know.
I can't explain it.
I'd like to have a beer with.
Right.
And I can just never imagine having a beer with Clinton.
Yeah. What kind of drink does she like? Some fancy pants DC drink.
But I can tell you, but Jamie, just to get back to the depoliticization, the idea that, Biden is that they like a certain a policy set, but they would vote for Biden over Bernie is depoliticization. I just don't agree with that, because I'll tell you this, and I feel this even more so in retrospect. I think, when I look at Elizabeth Warren's policies to a certain extent, but also her executive skills, I think she's very good at inside politics. But at one point during the campaign, it became clear to me after just mistake after mistake that she didn't fundamentally understand sort of like a different type of politics. And I think that there was real question, certainly by February, in my mind, as to whether she could win in a general election. Like I certainly had more question about her winning in a general election than Biden, I think. And if the election came down to Biden or Clinton, Warren, I probably would voted for Warren, let's say. I mean, we'll just assume that Bernie wasn't involved in it. But it wouldn't be crazy in my mind for someone to say, I think Biden has a better chance of winning than Warren. Like, I don't think that's depoliticization at that point. I think it's looking towards a general election and saying the first issues to get rid of Donald Trump. And I think that there's a candidate that may have liabilities in the context of a general election against Donald Trump. I mean, I think
there's a little column A and maybe there's a little column B in there. I also think you really can't compare Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren as candidates, because she was obviously a weak candidate in terms of outward.
But I'm not comparing
politics.
Bernie Sanders. I'm not comparing Bernie Sanders. I'm saying, assume Bernie Sanders. I'm comparing Biden and Warren in terms of the general election. Like, I think that, but I just don't think.
I'm talking about what actually happened.
If primary voters who choose one person they think has a better chance of winning in a general election over another, right? If that's the definition of depoliticization, that's a very, very big job.
Yeah, I know. Trust me.
Like that's
Rome wasn't built in a day, and ideology operates on all kinds of subconscious levels. Not
Rome
just
was built within, over the course of like decades. And I think that if you're talking about people in a primary making a strategic decision as to, even if it's a wrong one, which I would agree with. I mean, I think that making a strategic decision as to who's going to beat a candidate in the general, if they're depoliticized, then, Rome is not necessarily the thing. What you want to look at is like, I don't know, like broad strokes of evolution of man.
No,
I
think
think different definitions.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't need to be one or the other in the sense that Warren's politics could have been more popular potentially in the general election if her strategy was less elite focused, and then it could have changed, right? So I think there are a lot of factors, and a lot of it stemmed back to the horrible strategy, and I think her very poor instincts when it came to appealing to masses and what works outside of Washington or Massachusetts.
But I want to agree with Sam on this, because I think it became clear that Warren wasn't up to that, and she wasn't a strong candidate.
But
exactly.
I think it's about litigating Warren.
Look, exactly. No, I agree. But I just want to say, I think it would have made sense at that point to say, I think I'm going to vote for Biden in this primary because I don't trust Warren in the general. And I don't think I'm depoliticized for saying that at all.
I think that's a different it's not an analogous situation to the one that actually happened and the one that I'm discussing. Yes, if it were down to Biden versus Warren, I would agree with you, but I don't think that's exactly what happened in this case.
But how can depoliticization just mean that people, if you think it's a valid choice to say Biden could win over Warren, then how can you say that it's depoliticization to believe that Biden could win over Sanders? I mean, I happen to think that if coronavirus had not hit, we would have been, I mean, I don't know. It's a very apples and orange situation,
because
but I think it could
so
have been a
evidence.
disaster. I mean, I think without coronavirus, I don't know what Joe Biden would have done, frankly. But that's not here nor there. I disagree with the assessment that someone makes in February before coronavirus that Joe Biden has a better shot of winning than Bernie Sanders. I get the whole thing of they would have had, the race would have changed. It wouldn't have been just a referendum on Donald Trump. Bernie Sanders would have been taking incoming flack in a way that Joe Biden didn't, because Joe Biden more or less cipher and nothing could stick with him. I do think that they would have deployed with more efficacy the idea that you're a socialist, this and that against Bernie Sanders, because Bernie Sanders couldn't say that's bunk. I won the primary because I said I wasn't a socialist. But with that said, and I'm talking in a non-COVID world, Bernie Sanders would have a proactive message to motivate other voters and to diminish Trump's support in certain areas, because he's offering something that they want in some instances. But my point is that if that's what depolitization is, where it's okay to say that Biden's a better candidate than Warren, but not Sanders, then that word, I don't know what that word means.
I mean, another way to look at it is just capitalist realism, right? There's a reality that has been foisted on all of us. We are all subject to it. I'm subject to it. Sometimes the things I say sound crazy to me myself, because I live in a world where I'm being told every day that better things are not possible. But unlike Warren, there was lots and lots of polling evidence that Bernie would have done just as well as Joe Biden against Donald Trump. But people still didn't want to believe it, because that is what they've been taught for their whole entire lives.
I guess so. I mean, the polling was, it was certainly within the margin of error. I don't think that that decision is so irrational. I mean, it's certainly within the playing field of being able to do it. I happen to think it was a wrong decision, but I just don't think that it's of a different kind.
I mean, there's also more than one lens through which you can look at this,
I know. I just don't think that it's fair to say, if the word depoliticization means that somebody in a primary making an assessment that one candidate has a better shot of beating Donald Trump than another, if that's depoliticization.
And what goes into that assessment?
Well, but I get what you're saying, that they're saying I can't imagine that a guy can run and I don't think they all decided this, but I think, maybe let's say a majority of them did, who were supporting us, would have supported Sanders, but they're well, I'm afraid that he's going to get attacked as a socialist, and that's going to motivate Trump voters more. And Biden, stands for nothing, and so he won't be able to get attacked. I mean, I think it's the wrong assessment, but I don't think that's like, I don't think it's a function of people not having sort of like being so removed from like their sense of what is possible. I mean, I think there's a lot high stakes. I mean, Biden barely won, and he had this whole coronavirus thing. I also think the calculation would have been different if Bernie Sanders was 45 or 50 instead of, into his 70s. And I mean,
it's like the same age as Joe Biden.
Well, he's 4 or 5 years older and had a heart attack.
Unfortunately, though, it's the perception of Bernie being older than Biden was really hard to shake. It was constantly talked about by Dems and Libs, and Biden's was like, yeah, let's not pay attention to that. Yeah, he has experience.
Which is weird, right? Because Bernie is so much sharper when he talks about things than Biden is.
Well,
without a doubt. But I mean, all of this goes into it. I mean, like I think it's I don't think it's irrational to say that I disagree.
The rationality is a Cold War rationality. I mean, it's very political. I mean, stretching it. I think it right like.
It's just politics that we don't like does not necessarily mean that it's depoliticized. They are politicized. It's just that they're politicized in the wrong direction.
Well,
depoliticized means that you don't think that there's any implications that getting involved in politics or engaging in this stuff will affect your life in any way. And
yeah, that's the non-voters.
That way, you would not vote. You would not be making a strategic decision on who can, and it's also not even saying like nothing can change. You can believe that things can change, but you could also say like,
but
in this instance,
there can be two tiers of politicization maybe to kind of bridge this gap, right? Like the broader one that Jamie's talking about, that's more policy focused, and then the more simplistic, guttural politics of voting for someone like Joe Biden, where it's less about, coalescing and broad politics of coming together and pushing for something substantive.
Yeah, word. Assad Haider has written some really good stuff about this, and he is much more eloquent than I am. So I can send that to you if you want to know a little bit better about where I'm coming from on this. Sure. But it is like a very interesting concept to me, and it is a lens that I have found very useful to try to explain people's behavior when, even when they're voting, their expectations are just have a hard limit on them that's very hard to break through.
Well, I mean, we're seeing some version of that in the context of in the context of this, fight between Connor Lamb and AOC, right? Where and others, frankly, I mean, her critique was completely a mechanical and administrative one, and an execution one. She wasn't saying that Connor Lamb should support her ideology, but they turn it into that ideology can't sell anywhere. It's a little bit of a straw man, but it's also sort of like hiding the ball a little bit. And on some level, this is the dynamic. I think the dynamic between the two of them really captures what is problematic about the Democratic Party. I mean, putting aside that I think the ideological choices that AOC, I have a preference for hers. Putting that aside, what we're watching is a dynamic where partisan Democrats say there is a corruption within the context of the system to function like a good political party. Never mind, like even outcomes from a policy standpoint, but like doing the bare minimum to win, both in terms of electorally and in terms of legislation and the way that you promote that legislation if you get into office. There's a failure there. That is not an ideological argument. This is just simply an argument of like whether you're making widgets or you're making, prepackaged salads. Your operations need to function in a certain way. And the problem that we have now with the Democratic Party is in too many instances, there are too many people who are invested, literally invested in doing things the wrong way. And I mean,
that's part of why I think when looking at 2016, the institutional blowback and just fury about Sanders's campaign, I feel like it's not talked enough about how if Sanders won the nomination, they'd all be out of work. I mean, that was what was part of why they pushed back against him so much. It wasn't just policy-based, where it certainly was, and they were terrified of that. But literally, it would have been a cleaning of the house and a different organizing operation, way more grassroots focus, which is necessary to win. But when you're getting paid six figures on consulting gigs, you're not as interested in winning as you are as what you're saying publicly.
You know, the parties are not, you cannot make this an analogy too cleanly because of the nature of who Donald Trump is as a cipher and what the ability of the Republicans are. But you just described like what the Lincoln Project was, right? Like honestly, like those are the people who were jettisoned. They were outside the party apparatus. I mean,
and that's also just quickly, that's why it's so outrageous that libs kind of embrace them, because their exact organizing effort, it's not organizing, their exact advertising, that kind of politics is the exact reason Democrats lose. The embracing of that kind of flashy, ad-based trolling.
But it's just like flashy. It's just not effective. Like
right.
It's really.
Well,
just
it makes
like,
you feel like you're being effective.
In Hollywood, I have two examples from show business. One, there's a concerted effort when people release a new show, right? Executives, they will put the billboards on Sunset Boulevard, and that's where they'll spend their advertising budget because they're not looking necessarily to get views. They're looking to sell themselves to other executives to get their next job.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that I did a show for NBC, and it was based upon a show I had done earlier. We shot it all in digital video. It was one of the first people to use digital video in this. NBC Studios had never used digital video. We had a show that we were shooting for Fox under NBC, and we had to shoot it on video because it was Benjamin and I were going to be doing a lot of improv during it. And the head of NBC Studios, the NBC Productions, this is in 2001, 2002, got on a phone and said, this is a suicide mission to shoot with video. And that was just because there was a whole host of people who they couldn't imagine doing it in a different way than shooting on 16 millimeter. And they were afraid. They were all afraid that they would lose their jobs because they didn't know how to work with video. And they were afraid like it was going to cut down on times. No, ultimately they figured out a way of like, oh, we can still do this. But it's that attitude where people are just sort of married to a methodology because they're getting paid for it.
Yeah.
I want to bring up.
Go
ahead, Emma. I want to change topics kind of slightly.
My last point on this is just it's the conflation of what will be successful versus what makes me rich that is never delineated in the public. I mean, it kind of reminds me about the debate about the health of the economy and the Green New Deal, right? The economy would grow and create a lot more jobs and be more successful if we were to invest in forward-thinking technologies, but that wouldn't enrich the already existing entrenched powers and existing structures that donate to Republicans and Democrats too. So that's kind of the same thing where it's pretending like progress would be a bad thing when really it's only a bad thing for your pocketbook momentarily.
I wanted to bring up like Spanberger's district in Virginia, basically stretching from Richmond to Washington, D.C. Like previously that was Dave Bratt, Eric Cantor, just Republicans all the way back to the 70s. I mean, what are we losing by trying to save the Abigail Spanbergers of the world, really? Like, I mean, is that really, like, we talk about giving stuff up to Republicans that think they're trying to be helpful, like the Lincoln Project, but I don't know, Spanberger's district, like, I don't know. If you can't win that with your centrism, then, I mean, maybe that's not a district we should be prioritizing.
Right. I mean, that's all it is really a question of, I mean, I think she can. I think she did win that district, right? I mean, she ultimately did.
Narrowly, yeah.
Narrowly. And, you know, the bottom line is like, how much do we have to expend to save those people? But, and before we even contemplate that notion, it's like, are you just using best practices? And the answer is no. And so it's like, you know, that's the problem there. All right. Well, let's turn to something else too. Let's do this Jimmy Dore segment, because I found this. I mean, look, do we have a sense of what the breakdown is going to be in the House at this point? I mean, we still have some extant races.
Right. Well, it looks like the Democrats are likely to have lost around 7 to 11 seats. So just having a narrow majority there. They saw and targeted around 10 districts in Texas that they thought they were going to flip, and they didn't flip any of them. So that's just like a good example of how much of a failure Bustos, I can never say it, Bustos or Bustos.
Yeah.
Which one?
Sherry Bustos.
Bustos, not Bustos. Bustos. And Pelosi's strategy was here. It's very rough.
Okay, so we started at like around 232 of Democrats, and then there's like a couple others, and there's a couple that are vacant. And so if the Republicans pick up, let's say, I don't know, it's hard to say at this point, but 8 seats, they're around like 205. And the Democrats lose 8 seats, they're around 225. And maybe there's a couple other pickup street. So we could be talking about maybe a 10, 12, maybe on the outside, 15 vote difference here. That's important to contemplate, because here's Jimmy Dore. And again, like, you know, we were just talking about, sometimes your living depends upon a certain perspective. Here's Jimmy Dore talking about, you know, really, you want to talk about depoliticizing people. Here's Jimmy Dore on his take on the slightly expanded squad.
I don't care if Cory Bush just got elected and fucking Jamal Bowman and the squad, and they're there to fake you out. Progressives inside the Democratic Party are there to fuck you up and fake you out. They're not there to help you. So this idea that somehow now Cory Bush and Jamal Bowman is going to somehow add to the heft of the progressive caucus is just a pipe dream, because you have 6 people or 7 people who are kind of progressive inside the Democratic Party. What that does is gives a false signal to workers that the Democratic Party is an opposition party. It is not. They are there to give you the false impression that it is. And that's why AOC is in the party. That's why Cory Bush is now in the party. They are not taking over this fucking party. That is not happening. Those people are head fakes inside the Democratic Party. More power to Cory Bush. It's a fool's errand to send you into the Democratic Party. You are going to be squashed. Hey, the Democrats just got Cory Bush and Jamal Bowman. We have expanded the squad so that now we have more progressives who will do exactly as Nancy Pelosi tells them.
So proud of himself.
You think AOC has the balls to call out Nancy Pelosi?
She literally just did.
All right. Well, we got yes. I mean, she's literally just did.
She just on the eve of Biden's victory had the balls to critique the Democratic Party on cable news and in an extensive New York Times interview where no one else is doing that. But yeah, let's vilify the only people who are fighting for us.
Yeah. In that New York Times interview, she makes a point saying, like, I don't even know if I want to do politics because of what the Democratic Party is doing to her. The point is, she's actually proving that, right? Like, she's actually doing the work to, like they might run her out. I hope she doesn't. I hope she's, like, you know, in this for the long haul. But, like, she's actually doing the work. So if you do have that perspective, you actually can't just sit on a YouTube show predicting stuff and shitting on people.
No. It's so much easier to just be an outsider and critique the people who are doing the hardest thing imaginable, standing up to both Republican and Democratic establishments and doing it without corporate money from the ground up. But no, you get to feel morally superior because your Patreon subscribers
but here's
are
the thing.
paying you to just crap on Democrats. No,
he is
Tulsi
suggesting.
Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard is apparently his
Yes,
alternative.
exactly.
Yeah,
Tulsi.
right.
Tulsi
Right.
on.
The true champion of the working people who's going to stick it to Pelosi, who's on her way out of
Who
Congress
endorsed
right now.
Biden?
Yeah.
Here's what's also sort of just incredibly nihilistic about it. First off, as that gap between Republicans and Democrats decreases, right, the power of the squad goes up. 6-7 votes, are very close to making a majority. Now, if this moron, who I think at last check was, promoting the Green Party, if this moron wanted to use any of the massive audience that he has, he would have the Green Party or help a Green Party congressional candidate. Because all you need now is like 3 or 4 of them. And they could be basically leverage those 6 or 7 people. This guy, when I talk about depoliticization, this guy has such a complete disregard for the politics that exists today. It is literally like just saying he might as well be talking about that, I know people are flying in planes now. Okay. But air flight is not real until humans can fly. I mean, that's basically what he's saying. Like, they're not really flying. They're in planes. When humans can fly, then we are flying. I mean, put up, this is also what is, I really got me going today. Put up that tweet. I spent an hour on the phone with this guy when he called in because he was upset that I was mocking him, or not mocking him, actually. To be fair, I was actually taking him quite seriously. I can assure you that during that interview, and people can go back and look at it, I was getting IMs from people that I care about saying, don't be too mean with him. Do not destroy him too badly. Literally, the quote was, don't take the headshot. Even though it was just sitting right there throughout this entire debate with him, where his whole plan was that Hillary Clinton was going to lose. And then at the time he was like, and then we'll get Elizabeth Warren in there. And the Republican Party is going to destroy Donald Trump and they're going to fall apart. We're going to win in 2022. We're going to win in 2018.
Yeah.
We're going to take over.
That's why Trump was better for progressives than Hillary Clinton.
We're going to take over the Supreme Court because these Democrats, who I think are feckless, are going to finally build a spine and take over the party. I mean, look, because I was arguing like Democrats are feckless. They're not going to be able to stop 3 Supreme Court justices. And he told me that was the equivalent of the moon, worrying about the moon falling in Lake Michigan. This guy is so stupid when it comes to politics. I'm totally in favor of him holding a sign up and promoting any of his causes. But his analysis is completely disempowering. If you as a progressive, and even if you're like, frankly, like I can understand to a certain extent if you're radical to the point where you don't want any of this to exist, that's fine. That represents, with all due respect, a very, very small portion of the American populace.
For now.
But be that as it may, the idea that there is no value in having a slowly growing band of insurgents who have taken out parts of the Democratic leadership, right? And there's no value there. Then there's value in what exactly? Go put it. This is amazing because he's attacking that Dilbert dude. And Scott Adams says one Trump accomplishment that no one credits him for is getting the public to be more engaged in the political process. This was literally like
his
one
argument.
of the talking points of Jimmy Dores at the time was like, people are going to care and there's going to be a revolution because Donald Trump is going to be so horrible. And my greatest fear was like, I've been down this road before. I know what happens after you have a horrible Republican president. You get you get backsliding on the Democratic part. And he goes, one accomplishment of lung cancer is that people now care more about air quality standards. Yes, a lot of people think I'm a wicked smart. That's exactly what I said to Jimmy Dore. I didn't use that analogy. That would have been a good one. But this guy is so turned around in the BS he's espousing. I mean, what is his...
Well, this is what happens when we're talking about depoliticization, as you mentioned. This is what happens when the consequences of politics are not intertwined with your commentary on politics. It's all about which team and which personality you don't like. And Nancy Pelosi, we all don't like. So, everyone's under the umbrella of her. And God forbid, AOC called her Mama Bear one time. And yet, substantively, on the actual issues, she's combating her regularly. So he's going to demonize people of color and women, all of these people who are being brave and bucking the party establishment, so everyone can kind of feel angry and direct their ire towards specific personalities, divorcing that from the ideas that they're pushing and the material conditions on the ground of how they would help people in Congress. But no, now they're on the same team as Pelosi, and we don't like Pelosi, right? So discard them.
It's a very simplistic analysis, obviously. But I will say, I am deeply agnostic about electoral tactics as a way to
we're not talking about electoral tactics. We're not talking about electoral tactics.
Yes,
we're talking about legislatively and how you build power within a party and within the context of the Congress. If I have 7 votes, if I have a block of 6 or 7 votes, and there's a 12-person majority, you can put yourself in that fulcrum. We have seen time and time and time again where like so-called moderate Dems or conservative Dems in the Senate have done this. Joe Lieberman did it with the Affordable Care Act. If it wasn't for Joe Lieberman deciding he needs to be the power position, he was just doing it so that he could make sure that he was relevant at that time. But we would have had a 55, you could buy into Medicare at age 55. Now, that is insufficient, but I can tell you, 2 years from now, 1 year from now, that would make a big difference in my life, buy into Medicare. I mean, a huge difference. And particularly in like a situation like COVID, where you have a lot of people who are age 55 and can't get back, or after the financial crisis in 2008, you can't get back into the job force. The idea that you could get health insurance, we should have Medicare for all, but the difference is substantial. And to not acknowledge or recognize how our government works, like this is why he is like Alex Jones. Because he's basically saying the only solution to this is down this sort of wormhole where you just realize there are forces that you cannot combat, even if you have people like Cory Bush or AOC. Like what is, if it's not the answer to build that power,
what's his?
Well,
what is the answer?
This is what I'm saying. What he's saying is vague enough so that there are probably smart leftists out there who might be like, oh, yeah, I guess I kind of agree with that. But you need to put forth an alternate plan to build class power and to create progress. And that is something that he has not done. Yeah. Right. That is different from like my recent Antifada against angry workers. They are deeply skeptical of Jeremy Corbynism, the labor movement, in its ability to, I mean, they failed to mobilize working class voters. And they were saying, hey, what should we do instead? We moved to a working class neighborhood for 6 years. We got jobs at Amazon. We got jobs at food manufacturing factories. We talked to people. We met them. We organized on the job. We developed an analysis of the food supply to London. And then we wrote a 1,000-page book about what we did and about, exactly what workers need to be doing in order to build autonomous power. That is something I have not seen from Jimmy Dore.
Okay. But I mean,
that's an understatement.
But it is an understatement. And here's my point. That would be the equivalent of me saying that is bullshit because we just saw Jeremy Corbyn lose power and therefore their book didn't do anything. As opposed to like what vision of for people who want a policy set or a revolution or whatnot, what is the vision of where AOC or Cory Bush or that squad, the existence of those people there is problematic. No, like I can come up with you could say it's certainly insufficient, but and I think anybody who says like we've reached nirvana now that they're there, okay, we're done. That's also ridiculous. But in what vision of even the most radical change that you want in this country, when you talk about depolitization as a failure of imagination of what could be, in what vision of that is it not a good thing Is it not a net positive to have people like that actually taking power, becoming the number 3 fundraiser in the country, becoming basically the most popular politician in the country or well-known politician in the country? Like, in what way is that a negative?
No, I don't think it is at all. I
Of
think
course
it
not.
certainly couldn't hurt. It might be helpful. And I think there's really no way to know for sure, except in retrospect, how helpful it actually was. But
absolutely.
I'm not mad at it.
But this is what bugs me. This is what bugs me about Jimmy Dore is he's not talking to those leftists. He exists to smear the left as naive about all this stuff. When, guess what? I've never said I'm confident we're going to take over the Democratic Party. I just see that that's where actually the work's being done. I don't see where the work is being done by any of these other people. I think the squad is actually one of the best signs for progress in the last decade, frankly, in a lot of demobilization. We talk about these massive protests, right? There's massive protests against the Iraq war. That still went on. We need to have serious, people to actually take power. And again, I think Jimmy Dore, he's not speaking to the left. Look at his comments. He's speaking to right wingers that want to shit on the left all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't even like to entertain him as a part of the left.
Well, I know. I mean that he's not a part of the left anymore, basically, and that's what happens when you feel you have created this brand of outrage towards the left purely, which seems disproportionate to the reaction and his commentary on the right. I don't know. I don't watch what he does, but that's what
he
happens.
made fun of the Dilbert guy for having the exact same opinion about Donald Trump, but 4 years later. So there's that.
Right. It's a brand where you feel superior while offering no solutions, which makes you not a serious person.
Well, his popularity, I think, just goes to show you that people really are they're disillusioned and they're angry and they're looking for some way to funnel that into an analysis. And Jimmy Dore is providing a very simplistic one that might feel emotionally satisfying, but
definitely
what does it do
emotion
at the end
is
of the
a
day?
great Jamie, I think that's emotionally satisfying is exactly right. It's just a way. It's not actual political analysis. It's just a rage outlet.
Yeah, it's
and I think
and often directed at women. I mean, that's kind of some of what I see. Yeah.
I would say also that we got to keep it in perspective. I mean, the reason why I talk about Jimmy Dore is just because we used to fish in the same pools, and I think less and less. But whatever it is, whatever that show is with the from Crooked Media, the Pod Save America, they get a much bigger audience, right? I mean, and Joe Rogan gets a much bigger audience. I mean, it's not terribly dissimilar on some level, feeding some of the same impulses on some level, but at least Rogan corrects himself.
I mean, he balances the equation so you can end everything's corrupt. I can just sit on my ass. That's fundamentally the Jimmy Dore message. It's nihilism. He's betting on failure.
The same thing with it's exact the same thing too with Alex Jones. It's just basically look, these people are they're changelings. They're in the Bilderberger. There is no cracking the code here until a candidate that will actually promote him decides to run, and then all of a sudden his whole edifice.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Goes up.
I'm pretty sure, by the way, that Dore was affiliated with the Tulsi Gabbard campaign, and I don't really know.
Just hilarious.
And I don't know if that for a fact, but there were rumors that he was and didn't disclose it. So
his YouTube numbers certainly were.
Really?
I don't know.
That's interesting.
Well, I do know for a fact that he was very, very upset. Well, he was public about it. His whole thing was who's going to come on my show? And if they don't come on my show, then they're not good for America. I mean, honestly, what a child.
Maybe we should just invite Jimmy on. He can argue
I invite
Tulsi's.
Jimmy has an open invitation to come on this program.
I just want to frame it this way.
I'll do a special episode, any time of the day. I'll pre-record. I'll record on a phone. I will do it. Any mechanism. He's had a 4-year open invitation to come back onto the show.
Yeah, and you get to defend the squad, and he gets to defend Tulsi and whoever is part of that squad.
Absolutely.
And we'll just see whose theory of change is better.
Yeah, this guy was his last thing. This guy pretends to be a leftist in favor of workers and was just not a nice guy to people who work behind the scenes at my old job. So really don't like him. Don't think well of him at all.
Salt the Amazon warehouse or STFU Jimmy Dore challenge.
There you go. All right, let's talk about another grifter. This one, I doubt he'll pay any type of price for this. This is what the run up to the election was so lucrative for Tim Pool that I cannot imagine that. And this is why you do this, right? I mean, this is why you do this. You make hay while the sun is shining. And if you got to clean up your mess afterwards, you do it because, you know, most of your listeners, okay, we got one wrong. I mean, people get it wrong all the time, but he was so sure of this. Here is a clip, a series of clips. This is from the Tim Pool Clips Twitter feed of Tim Pool's prognostication.
I think Kamala and Biden might be throwaway candidates. They know they're going to get steamrolled in the election. I really don't see the Democrats winning this. I think it's fair to say Trump's going to win re-election. I think Trump might have a massive, massive victory, which shocks the left. I think we're looking at a Trump victory, man. Trump 2020 landslide, even with everything going on with COVID. I think that's what we can expect. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Trump had a 49-state landslide. I think we could see a 49-state landslide. We may be looking at a Mondale-Reagan type scenario where Trump landslides 49 states. And we may see a 49-state landslide. Maybe a 50-state landslide. That'd be amazing. I think we might be seeing a 49-state landslide. I just really think it's more likely that Trump wins 520 electoral votes. No amount of mail-in ballots will matter. If Trump gets 537 or 36 or even 538 every single electoral vote. We all know Joe Biden will lose. Like, let's be real, man. As I've stated 1,000,001 times, Donald Trump's going to win. The Republicans are going to sweep. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Biden has defeated Donald Trump.
There you go.
I love the internet.
What's that crab rave going on in the background?
I'm not sure, but Tim Pool clips with the edit there.
That looks like fun.
I know. It makes me want to go somewhere tropical, hang with some crabs.
Dave Rubin has been saying for at least 3 or 4 years that he's really sensing something changing in the country, that people are really starting to walk away from the illiberalism of the Democrats. And there couldn't be more evidence that that is not true. It is true that there are people, more people than ever, that came out in support of Donald Trump. But it is also true that between 2018 and or 2020, or you can look at them individually, more people voted for Democrats than had in over a century. And so you couldn't be more wrong. I mean, really specifically than Dave Rubin has been over the past 3 or 4 years. But fortunately now that all you need to do is call yourself a former liberal or lefty or whatever it is he calls himself, and it gets you a job at with Glenn Beck until your audience finds out probably that your cultural values do not align quite in the way that they want you to. But that's probably for another video, I don't know, 6 to 8 months from now. But here is Dave Rubin. This is him gloating over and he gloated just a little bit too early. He didn't read those things about the potential red mirage.
But this Trump win, it's a pushback on big tech. It's a pushback on mainstream media. Like all of you people who have consistently gotten everything wrong, you did it again. You got it wrong again. And you losers. And now I'm going to do this will be a little bit of a patting myself on my own back. You loser at the Lincoln Project. Like you people who clearly can't maintain an erection so that you then decide that you have to spend your life just being against one thing. This
That's
orange
not
man.
correlated.
It's like, you guys got to go away now. But the thing is, we're not going to put you on lists. You know, I did a couple of videos in the last 2 weeks about lefties, like well-known lefties like Robert Reich, who was in the Obama administration, talking about how we're going to have truth and reconciliation commissions. And Chris Hayes, that little dork on MSNBC, he was saying the same thing. You know, we have to have these commissions and we're going to have to find out what happened and name names and get lists of people. Guess what? Trump and the right, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. But that doesn't mean we can't mock you guys and or at least ignore you guys. Like all of you people who've gotten everything wrong. Bill Kristol, you've gotten everything wrong. David Frum, you've gotten everything wrong. You guys got to go away now. Like, we're not going to come and get you. We're not going to try to destroy you. We're not going to show up at your house or arrest you or send you to the gulag. A lot of the stuff that the lefties would love to do with all of us. But all of these people who just do everything wrong, who have refused to see the world as it is and could only see the world as they wanted it to be. It's like, no. And the pollsters, you guys got everything wrong. How is it? I am one guy. I sit here. My producer, Michael, is in the room. It's a small room. It's about, 12 feet by 12 feet. I got my dog at my feet. I got Michael here, and we write out a couple things, and then I do this.
What? You don't read anything?
What I've been able to do, makes a lot more sense to a lot more people than the nonsense that's coming out of mainstream media.
I don't read. I don't do anything. I just sit here with my producer, and that's it. And how did I get this?
And his dog. And his dog.
That was a nice catch. Yeah, he did say us quite a bit.
Multiple times. He is completely indoctrinated. He's now owning it. He's a part of the right. He's a religious right-winger who got his notoriety by pretending to be a leftist, but a real leftist atheist. I don't think that's all you need to know.
People
about
need to remember
Dave
that,
Rubin.
right? It was his new atheism, which actually, and this is,
his connection to Sam Harris. That's what got him onto the political scene. And now he's doing videos that like shitting on secularism.
I mean, this is, it is a fascinating, you could actually I think someone could, there should be theses written on this, because one of the claims about Dave Rubin, one of the reasons why people like me went after Dave Rubin was because he was a gateway to right-wingerism. And in fact, it turns out he was such a gateway himself that he was like taking people on a journey. This is how you go from a secular liberal to a now religious right-winger. And I'm fascinated. This is where it's going to, I mean, he has to go further in his trajectory. And I had predicted that he would come out against abortion, and he has now for all, almost totally. And we played a clip of him a couple of weeks ago where he was talking about how the secularism on the left has destroyed the moral values that people have. And he talked about transgender, and he talked about all these moral values, except for the one big one that still lies out there on the right. And we're going to see it when the Supreme Court starts to attack Obergefell, and that is marriage equality. And it's going to be interesting to see how much he has to run from. I'm fascinated by this. Is going to be the most interesting. This has become the most interesting thing about Dave Rubin. How will he manage to stay on the blaze when this issue comes back into vogue, when the right is empowered by the Supreme Court and they feel like they can actually take away some rights from...
He'll justify it because it's his class overall. Sorry, Jamie, go on.
He's a rich white guy. That's exactly what I was going to say. They do not affect his rights at all whatsoever, although it would be funny if his new friends coerced him into going to conversion therapy and also becoming a Jew for Jesus.
Yeah. He's going to come out as straight soon enough.
I don't think he's going to suffer. The only way I think he's going to suffer is how is he going to be, the interesting part is going to be, how is he going to finesse this on the blaze? Oh, no, I don't think he's going to suffer at all. He's going to stay in California where his rights will be intact and he'll be fine. And he's in a $5 million house now. He's okay.
Yeah.
Like he says, he's in the basement with his dog and his $5 million house. That's fine. But what's actually genuinely the first interesting thing about Dave Rubin, I think, in a legit way, will be how he finesses, and he doesn't have a lot of faculties, how he finesses this on the blaze. Like, how long is it until he has to actually get a divorce and get into conversion therapy?
The left just went so crazy with identity politics that they forced the justices to reverse this decision.
I used to be married to a guy, and now I realize what a mistake it was. I was like, the left had got so illiberal that I thought I had the right to marry somebody of the same sex.
Yeah.
That's how illiberal they got.
That's what he's going to say. He's going to say, this gay marriage works in my situation, but the left just perverted it or corrupted it, and now societally we just need to rein things back a little bit.
Too much marriage.
Mm-hmm. My new friends sent me to a
Don't
really
rub
fun
it in my
camp.
face. Just don't. I just don't want it in my face. Is your liberalism?
Oh boy. All right, let's take some more phone calls and some. Oh geez. Okay. Jeez, oh Pete. Sorry, folks. We got to take. I know I can say this every day. Calling from a 929 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yeah, it is.
Hi, my name's David. I'm from New York and I'm in Miami right now.
All right, David from New York in Miami. A little complicated.
I'm down here. I was covering the election for an Italian news site, and sorry you guys already moved on from the stuff you were talking about before about tactics, because that's basically what I want to talk about.
Talk about, please.
Yeah. Your caller, Michael from Miami, talking last week about his prediction of it going red. Just going around South Florida and talking to people, I was getting the same impression, really. And actually, the most interesting thing I found was actually at the Biden victory rally last Saturday. I spoke to a guy, and he told me that, I had this quote here. He said, Latinos, we use a lot of WhatsApp groups to go to soccer games, for whatever, for family events. They penetrated these groups, as in the Trump campaign. They penetrated these groups, and they started floating propaganda. And so people share memes. And I think the reason why Biden couldn't is because Americans don't really use WhatsApp. That's a very Latin thing. What they were saying is Biden's an idiot. He's not going to govern. It's going to be Kamala, who you don't know, who has a funny name, and she's a communist. And he was like sort of putting himself in someone's shoes, saying like, well, if I'm Cuban, I don't speak English, everyone that I know has fallen victim to this kind of propaganda. Sure, you can blame me for being misinformed, but I don't. I understand what happened. And that was just such a letdown to me. Like this whole, I'm talking about as myself now. That was just such a letdown to me. Like this lack of ground game, of like any sense
of a digital game, And, the campaign got warned by this. They were warned. Chuck Rocha was out there. He was trying to warn them of this. There's been a lot of reporting to back up just what you're saying. Facebook in particular and WhatsApp. And, there was a tremendous amount of disinformation that was, or, however you want to call it. There was a tremendous amount of political propaganda that was sent to these people that was completely was unmatched. And
beyond that, like, can you imagine, like, I also volunteered for Bernie in the primary, right? It's like, they have this big organization, people meeting each other, talking to people in a local area. There would, in that case, there would have not even necessarily an organizer or a paid strategist, but a volunteer probably locally would have been like, I'm on all these WhatsApp groups. I know a lot of people through them. Maybe would you guys like it if I posted some stuff or whatever? It would have just happened organically like that.
One of the problems that I think this campaign had, that also the Clinton campaign had, was a lack of enthusiasm for the top of the ticket. And now that is not to say, look, I don't think you need enthusiasm to get a lot of votes if the enthusiasm is against Donald Trump. It's a little bit tougher to get volunteers. And when you don't have these organizations on the ground, it's not just a function of them being able to persuade people. It's that they are the best line of defense in terms of finding out when there's a problem. I reference this all the time. We had Mike from PA call into this program a day after the election in 2016 and say, our get out the vote efforts on the day before the election, we're knocking on 25% of the doors we're knocking on were Trump voters. And it was because Clinton used modeling and digital tools, as opposed to having an organization of people on the ground. You may not have the ability to, because this is the academic perspective, that there isn't necessarily sufficient evidence that says a canvasser can convince people to vote.
that may be the case. You may need people who are within the community. You need to build it over time. But what they can do is they can report back like, hey, wait a second. We're seeing something that you in the campaign are unaware of. Now, a lot of organizations, maybe that message doesn't get through, but that is a not even a political, that is like, that's why, you have companies who, say like, well, we need to be able to hear from the people who serve our, coffees if there's a problem and people are not drinking half of it or whatever it is. I mean, it's like why a chef says like, how did the special do tonight? Because they want to get a sense of what the feedback is.
Absolutely, yeah. They just you guys went through it at length just now. They just totally negated that whole side of the game.
Appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, let's take some IMs. Folks, I'm not going to obviously get to your calls because it's another day. It's a day that ends with a Y. I mean, so that's what happens. I'm doing my best. We're going to have to do a 7-hour show. Now I know why those Twitch guys do like 12-hour shows. So they can take all their IM messages. All right, let's go through this. GBs. Did that already. Capable carpet. My hope prior to the election that this would be the last gasp of a dying Republican Party. Biden was sure to win the presidency. Democrats would hold both houses of Congress. Instead, we witness a Pyrrhic victory that will leave Democrats unable to address major problems facing the country. Indeed, my fear now is that this is the last gasp of a dying Democratic Party that will be unable to win nationally again. There is I think a legit concern about this redistricting. A legit concern.
It's not just the last gasp of the Democratic Party. I think our empire is in terminal decline.
That also, I think, is that too. Gabriel, hi, Sam. Gabriel here. I had called before Michael's passing to thank you all for your coverage of Brazilian politics. As a Brazilian immigrant in the U.S., you guys were a lifeline of information. I wanted to ask you if you get a certain snarky immigration lawyer to come on the show to talk about how the courts color the immigration process. I'm thinking about McConnell's dogged determination to appoint conservative judges. Yeah, I think he's gonna push more in the lame duck. Yep. I will look into that. But he's shadow banned on the show, so it's hard to bring on. It would be hard to bring on Ronald Reagan when he's shadow banned, but maybe we can do it. Moon in the Lake. Well, the ultra liberal commie network, CNN and MSNBC, have Rick Santorum and John Kasich on nonstop. The media has a lot of blame for the sorry state of our politics and no sign of changing. This shit's going to revert back if it hasn't already. There's no doubt in my mind. I would say if you voted for Joe Biden in the primaries, even if you're for progressive policies, you have been infected with pundit brain. Let these people get help. I mean, I personally, like, if it weren't for COVID, which dovetailed quite nicely with Joe Biden's campaign, we would be in big, big, big problems, I think.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I mean, the econ numbers, I think, are really all you need to know. Is Trump lost as an incumbent with most people saying they were better off than 4 years ago.
Yeah, that was the most staggering statistic. I mean, and also COVID helped Biden get over the final hurdle in the primary too. If we recall, like the last debate between Biden and Bernie was right when everything was at its most chaotic, and so they of course revert to the most familiar, safest perception-wise option.
Biden was helped not only by it made it more of a referendum on Trump. And required him to do less. In fact, it completely dovetailed with his strategy
to do nothing
of offering nothing, and which is not to say like he has stuff in his platform. Who knows? If there was a Democratic Congress, there would be some stuff that would be good, and I'd be happy about some stuff I wouldn't. But the strategy as a political matter was to offer nothing that would draw attention to Joe Biden, and COVID not only made it more of a referendum on Donald Trump, but also made the fact that Joe Biden wasn't getting out there completely legit because he shouldn't. Most people for most of the campaign were like, he shouldn't. The Magnus McClucken, this phenomenon that some folks see Dems want to lose can be explained by the fact that campaign leaders don't care whether or not they lose. They are profit maximizers. I think that I think that's true. I think
They'd
that's
be
true.
fine with winning. They'd be happy to win, but it's not the first priority.
It's the iron law. I mean, this is what we kept talking about. It's the iron law of power, which is you want to maintain your power in an institution, even if it comes at the cost of that institution losing power.
Mm-hmm.
People want to be the captain of a you know. I mean, like, you know, you can experience it. So like, you know, just like, I don't know, like in the playground, like, you know, like, are you going to say like, there's 6 of us playing this game of basketball. I'm the captain of the team, but I'm going to sit this out and let you guys play. Like, no, you do that. Like you do that. I don't know. You can see like an open mic too. People organize open mics so that they can get on stage. They're not going to look around and go like, I'm the least funny person here. I'm going to give up my time to somebody who's better. That doesn't happen. Yeah. So that there can be a better show.
And the big donors that give money to both parties, they win no matter what.
Over time, without a doubt. Moon Lake CBD, my household caught COVID, so I'm liberally deploying the Sunset Lake CBD and Liquid IV. We have a 3-year-old newborn. Oh, gosh. I haven't been able to find much on kids' symptoms. Have you heard anything new or noteworthy about babies or little kids? No, I mean, the only thing I can tell you is that the number of 3-year-olds who have suffered bad effects from COVID is super, super small, which is not to say that you shouldn't keep, an eye on them and whatnot. But kids, knock on wood, we got lucky on this, just seem to be particularly that young. And nobody's quite sure. It's possible maybe their lungs aren't even capable of like sucking in the viral load that you need. But keep an eye on it and good luck. Sorry you're going through this. Obama doesn't care. So the government must absolutely step in and force Pfizer to allow other companies to help produce this and distribute it. It cannot be the sole province of this one company. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Lindsey Graham cracker. Clinton won Georgia in 92. Right, okay. Carter won both times. Bucko, the Congressional Review Act, CRA, applies to administrative regulations, not executive orders. Biden should be able to reverse administrative orders immediately. You mean executive orders immediately when he takes office? Yes. The administrative orders are things like where the EPA says this is dangerous in water, et cetera, et cetera. Zephi, any suggestion about groups to donate in Georgia? Stacey Abrams' New Georgia Project is one, but I'm wondering if there are other local groups who could really use the funds. I don't know, but I would trust that Stacey Abrams one. I think they're heavily invested in this working. All right, 4 more. Doctor from New Jersey. I'm optimistic about the Pfizer vaccine. In fact, Operation Warp Speed significantly eliminates delays between FDA approval and distribution, since it gave government funding companies for mass production of potentially bunk vaccines. This should be a lesson for neoliberals and conservatives that austerity is bad and abandonment of it is necessary. Also, now that Trump is lost, I'm less worried about the influence of political pressure on the science. Yes, I agree. Mikey Indy. Hey, Sam, what's the deal with the Alaska Senate race? I know it wasn't close early on in the voting, but I thought Al Gross made a statement making it seem like they were confident it would close in the end. I haven't seen anything that suggests that he's closing, but maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. All right, 2 more. A Square. Thank you again for the wine, A Square. Sam, still a glorious Saturday. I'll take this lopsided win because it will surely mean some level of harm reduction. I saw your tweet about the Lincoln Project, Read Georgia, and the left. Also, take a look at the Schmidt tweet to Stepien, calling him home. Yes, they hate Trump, but they're assembling so much. As I enjoy some of this bile they threw at the Mad King, people need to be aware of what the Lincoln Project is. Please tweet the list of organizations in Georgia that Ben mentioned. And the final I am of the day here in Virginia. Oh, let me do this. Here in Virginia, the legislature votes to send amendments to the ballot. With their hard-fought trifecta, Dems decided to offer Amendment 1, which creates a really dumb independent election commission. Indeed. With their hard-fought trifecta, Dems chose to abdicate their duty to wield power. That's a real problem with the Democrats. Matt,
Emma, Jamie, good job today, guys. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know